What are unethical practices schools do? Well, I don't know about other schools, but when I came forward about a female classmate sexually harassing and emotionally abusing me, they shrugged their shoulders and asked if I tried saying no. I'm also female, by the way. She got away with doing it to 2 of my friends and another kid in her grade. She claimed he raped her, so she got transferred to my stagecraft class. Mind you, she made claims like that constantly, to the point where I was sure she was histrionic, because she made sexual comments and stuff like that all the time. Also threatened suicide when I told her I didn't want to date her. Our teacher shrugged his shoulders and said okay. Went to the counselor, and she told me, well, have you tried saying no? Gee, why didn't I think of that? The last straw was when she touched my ass in front of everyone in class. As in poked my ass when I was bent over, working on an assignment. I went up to her, told her to frick off, and she never spoke to me again. Instead, moved on to one of my best friends. So in short, not taking stuff like this seriously. Women can be abusive or victimized just like men can be abusive or victimized, and it should be taken seriously regardless of the abuser's gender. Edit. I just wanna clear this up real quick. She made claims all the time about having been abused by family members and by other people. I wasn't denying what she claimed was true, but she talked about it all the time, especially when we'd talk to each other, as if it was to score sympathy from me. I have no way of knowing if what she said was true, but I was skeptical, because it was a very common theme in conversations with me and the others she harassed, not to mention that she talked about it like it wasn't a big deal at all. We'd have conversations about anatomy assignments or about other school stuff and she'd just casually go, oh, this person rapped me this one time. Out of nowhere. Most, if not all, comments are unethical practices schools do that affect kids, but there are plenty of unethical practices that affect teachers as well. As with all things, it depends where in the world you live, of course. My wife's an elementary school teacher. A few things that come to mind. They get paid 35 hours a week, but that's the hours they are at school. However, they have nowhere near enough free time to prepare their classes and exams, grade homework and exams, etc. That has to be done at home, unpaid. Point a lot, and I mean a lot of required material comes out of their pockets. They have an ever so tiny budget every year for material that isn't even close to being enough. Everything else has to be purchased with their own money. Even at school, if they print/copy more than X pages, nowhere near enough, they have to pay for the extra pages. This is more of a COVID specific thing, but in Quebec, due to the explosion of COVID cases, they decided to have Zoom classes until the 17th of January. In the same announcement, the government made it very clear that anyone who can work from home should do so. Next day, my wife gets a message from her school telling her she'll have to do her Zoom classes from the school. Go figure. Point more specific to my wife's school, though I have no doubts it happens in many other schools as well. The more senior teachers have a lot of influence on how the students are split in the different classes, which often results in them taking all the easy students and leaving the more junior teachers with the difficult ones, rather than try and split them more evenly. So I see a lot of answers from students, and a lot of them are not unethical, so much as it is ignorance or apathy. Also, a lot of these responses are from 10, 20 plus years ago. A lot has changed. As a teacher, I'll give you the sheet. Kids don't see point in special ed. We will often keep a student who no longer needs services in special ed to pad our graduation numbers. Meaning to me has dyslexia, but to me has learned strategies to cope, and by 11th grade is above grade level reading, and can write at the college level. He doesn't need to be in special ed, but as a department we want to keep him classified, so our numbers as a department look better. Now to me is taking up resources and attention he doesn't need, so my special ed lead can advance their career, moving teachers to position they don't want. Most teachers sign a contract to work for a certain school, sometimes only a certain district. So if you were hired in the spring to teach sophomore English, but fall rolls around they need a 12th grade special ed science teacher and you're certified, guess where you're going? Point and deserving special ed students due to budget issues. When I worked in the inner city I would draw up IEPs, individualized education plans, for special ed students. Often I would try to include services in all 4 academic subjects. If you can't read in English class, you can't read in science either, and I would be told no, we only have the staff to serve English and math. Take these services off. These are the biggest things I can think of currently going on in schools, non-COVID related. Thought people might be interested in the unethical stuff that students don't really see. Punishment rules in general have faked me and my friends over numerous times. The process of getting bad students/teachers reprimanded is convoluted at best and useless at worst. When me and my friends were being bullied, like hardcore bullied my year group and the year below, we tried to report the main 4 to safeguarding. Bear in mind, the incident that pushed us over the edge was watched by a pet teacher. They had a meeting which only made it worse. Turns out, all they did was have a stern talking with them. We told safeguarding it got worse, and they couldn't do anything else. It was against the rules. Left us with no choice but to skip a lot of our classes out of literal fear. We got in trouble for it. Obviously. I don't know what type of rules they have in place that mean these students have no choice but to skip lessons for fear of their sanity. But we can't punish these students as their mindset, but they are stupid. LMAO. Edit. Wanna add this second story. My friend was verbally abused by our English teacher for 2 years because she was misandrist. And this is no joke either. People have purposefully failed English to be moved down a set. Her class was for A and A students, so they had to get C and D grades to be moved down to not deal with her, or dropped English literature altogether when lower classes got too full. Male students did noticeably statistically worse in her classes, and in the entire history of her being one of the 2 English literature teachers, 8 males had taken it at A level and 7 dropped it after 1 year. My friend was the exception. He was determined to do well, not fail, because she refused to not fail him. He was getting A grades in the other teacher's class. He reported her 3 times in those 2 years and it only led to more literal torture. Every lesson he would get lectured or shouted at for saying an argument not approved by her, being nice towards the male characters, or basically just speaking. It took admin me, a female, getting in trouble for standing up to him for them to think that maybe they should change something. They didn't, but we inspired the year below us to hate her and make her life misery. There's now someone making their essays based on seeing The Handmaid's Tale, her favorite book, commentary on business and the businessman instead of Men Are Satan, just to piss her off. So, nothing's changed, but my friend got a C in English in the end. My time to shine. Burned out former Texas elementary school teacher here. I left because of a student I'll call Daniela. Daniela's parents were illiterate, not judgment, just fact. Immigrants from Central America who wanted the education for their children that they never got. But because they were illiterate and working 12 to 14 hours every day, they couldn't help Daniela learn her own language, let alone read and write in English. So Daniela struggled in school her entire career and was unable to read or comprehend in any language. And the school system was designed to tear her down, not meet her where she was at and lift her up. So by the time she came to me in 5th grade, she wouldn't look at me, wouldn't lift up her head. She looked beaten, terrified of yet another year of failure, no matter how hard she tried. Another year of a school system telling her that all her work and all her effort just wasn't good enough. She wasn't good enough. By the time we had worked together for about 3 months, Daniela would finally look at me and even crack small jokes in her limited English. We celebrated each small success she made and each step that showed some growth. She was making so much progress and beginning to feel less hopeless. Until state standardized testing time. You see, the test was deliberately written in language 2 years above grade level expectations for a native English speaker. All us teachers knew it. Not a goddamn thing we could do about it. So we had to give this biased, useless test to our bilingual students who struggled with English 2 grade levels below and expect them to succeed on this test. And of course our administrators, our school culture, and our parents all told our kids what a big deal this test was, and it's important to your future, and it shows what you know, and if you don't pass, we'll retain you. What a great faking message, right? I had to give Daniela the test or lose my job. Can't cheat for her. Teachers have been arrested and charged for that. So I watched this kid who had worked her faking ass off all year, test for 5 faking hours, How many adults do we ask to do that? And I watched her fail. And I had to tell her her score. And no matter what I told her about how it didn't really matter, and I knew how hard she worked and how much growth she had shown, she knew she'd failed again. Just like always, I have many more stories like that. But she will always stick with me. Fact: the school system. Only going to talk about higher education. I attended a large state college in a sprawling state system. 100% failure courses. Professors who treat 100 level courses as a churn the fodder situations and their faculty your problem. They use the wrong scantron and whole class failed due to that. Oops, your fault. The moment a professor says this course is so hard most of my students fail, GTFO. TARS selling the exams to students. Yep. That psychotic exam you wondered how Wonder Bro passed? They bought the answers paying for a course with a professor and only meeting/seeing the TAR. TAR shows up high or drunk to course, or can't speak English. Wildly unqualified professors. Had a student bring his CPA brother into one of my accounting courses. The dude stopped short of attacking the professor, and spent the latter half of our course previewing and correcting the professor every other sentence. Another example, I taught a Windows/technology course, because the professor graduated in computer science before Windows existed. He sat there decaying in the corner, while I taught the course. Then let me preview the departmental exam to ensure our review covered everything. Clusterfuck departmental exams and /or professor made exams that are the embodiment of fuck you. I got mine. Ever take an exam to see a few examples and wonder where the fuck those examples were from? Previous editions of the textbook. The departmental exams aren't updated by edition and often rely on specific examples from the previous editions. I also spent a fuck ton of time in the math lab, because I had a math professor trying to make rocket scientists hour of business majors. I kept organizing our entire class to go to the math lab and take up all their resources to the point they brought her in and told her to tone it the fuck down. She then came up with two different exams. A and B. A exam was basic algebra. B exam was given to each person at the meeting with the chair of the math department. I seriously am not math major and this was over a decade ago, but I didn't know you could put a matrix into an algebraic expression that contained 40 plus polynomials. Our exams got tossed, and we were given a P4 pass for the course. Non-state curriculum, different track courses that lead to the same diploma you get, but it's from a private institution. It's basically the opposite of 100% fail courses, where the math is gutted out of courses and they are reduced to vocabulary. I tutored students for stat in private and state colleges, to get your stat I credit to graduate, wink wink, and the state course was skull-splittingly difficult. Private curriculum, I didn't know why they needed a tutor, because it was literally just vocab. It was also a thing to tutor to an exam for a few private school attending students. I literally had the exam and just had to teach the student to show her work for the few examples that were on the exam, failing an entire physics course because our professor got married to some rich/royal guy in Europe and went off to have a European wedding. Was a few weeks before our final, and she hadn't made available our homework or prior tests digitally. Even if you made a 100 on the final, the highest grade you could get was a 20 in the course. I suspect the only reason I accidentally graduated college was because each course I took was like sticking an anchor in their course system and dragging up all the shit and dirt it was based off of. If there was a cheaper textbook, I'll let students know. If the syllabus had the jackass lol did you read me, here are 3 points, I'll let everyone know. I'd normally take every question the professor provided, organized study groups and accidentally organized a walkout, along with accidentally having 3 meetings with different chairs for different departments. Almost all my courses prior to my senior year were P4 pass due to some bullshit on their end. It'd be like, I had an A before my professor ran off, and at start course, the registrar would tell me just use a grade replacement. I'd have to take the course again, pay 2x, then get a P instead of my A. Or hey, my managerial accounting professor failed to turn in our grades at all. He's literally here, we see him teaching, but he didn't turn in our grades. We'll just give you a P if you drop it. When I see how much people pay for higher education today, I'm like, holy fuck, buy the answers to your exams and just live a stress-free life. My elementary school had a weird thing where they suppressed all cases of bullying, most likely to keep public image clean. It was a Catholic public school. First instance of this was when I got bullied in like 6th grade. My classmate waited for me outside of the school with his friends, and I fought 3 guys at once in the cold while people were watching us in front of a faking Catholic school. After someone high up in the school intervened, Noon got punished, but I was still the one who got most of the sheet because my dad lashed out in pure anger and threatened to beat my bully up, even though I apologized for his behavior to the bully. Then, when our math teacher spent most of the year bullying one of my female classmates for absolutely no reason, she started making some threats towards all of us. We didn't learn jack shit that year, so most of us didn't know how to count fractions, which was the main topic of that grade. If I remember, it was in grade 6 or 7, can't remember now. My mom once told me to take the family camera to school, to set it up below me at the start of the lesson, and to record the teacher. I caught good 30+ minutes of footage of the teacher just straight up screaming in anger at this one girl who just wasn't taking her sheet. I gave the camera to my mom, and she, along with another girl's mom, who later left due to this bullying from teachers, went to the principal. They tried to get all of the parents on board with them to try to convince the principal, but all of the parents were straight up scared and held at a theoretical gunpoint by the female math teacher that promised that anyone's kid who snitched on her would fail the class. In the end, they managed to convince the principal, but for some reason, she never got kicked out, and we were the only class that didn't have math class with her anymore. What the fuck? The tipping point, when I was basically done with that school and was determined to never go to a Christian school in my life again, was when I got physically bullied in the bathrooms. There was this dude from another class that would follow me to the bathroom, and every time I went for piss, he punched me in the dick, sometimes leaving me in terrible pains in my groin. He got kicked out after the janitor caught him beating me up. He just straight up dragged him into the vice principal's office, while 2 teachers tended to me. Dude got kicked out of the school that same day. Everything got swept under the rug, and everyone who knew what had happened was forbidden to talk about it. Most of his classmates were unaware of the situation. I asked my mom if I could switch schools, but since it was the end of the school year, I wasn't allowed to, and besides that, a lot of the teachers were her friends. The last straw was when the beloved priest we all respected and were friends with found out that one of the girls wasn't Catholic, but evangelical/Protestant. He found out when he took my class to mass, and she stayed outside because she wasn't Catholic. He then kept making fun of her, and when she once wore a sheet with a hole in the back that revealed her spine, he pretended to take out his phone and snap pictures of her. Absolute faking creep. I found that behavior absolutely disgusting, and talked with her about it, even proposing to go to the principal, and using my contacts in the Catholic Church. I was an altar boy in a church that had a lot of people that were in contact with the bishop to get him punished. She just shrugged it off and said that she gets that treatment from Catholic adults all the time. Teacher here. Where to begin? Not allowing kids to go to the bathroom is probably the most urgent issue. If I always let kids go to the bathroom when they ask, I get in trouble. They have not renewed teacher contracts because they would always let kids go to the bathroom. This was literally a complaint at today's faculty meeting. Kids aren't allowed to have their phones with them in class. They have to turn them into me and put them in the phone caddy. I get that they can be a distraction, but they aren't for everyone. I had a policy that they didn't have to turn in their phones if they had an A or B in the class. It became motivation to get the kids to do their work. I got in trouble for this. I changed the policy to placate the school and grades went down across the board. I've had a kid who had a parent in the hospital. He was so distracted, he couldn't focus without having his phone at his desk in case a text from his mom came in. How was taking his phone helpful, not issuing punishments against bullies? I have a student who was bullying students in minor ways throughout the semester. Nothing was done, no matter how many times I reported it. By the end of the semester, she created a fake Instagram account in which she gossiped and lied about other students. She accused some students of illegal behavior, so the school has to get involved. My frustration is that they let it get that bad before they did anything. She had 3 days of suspension and then returned to class like nothing happened. If any of the students she badmouthed online retaliated, they would have been punished. Out of school suspension is a problem. Imagine that your boss said you really messed up, and as a result, you're going to go home for a few days. It won't affect your pay. It basically encourages you to mess up in the same way again. Dress code. High stakes testing is pointless. No one has ever learned anything from taking a test. I'm required to give a standardized test to my students at least once a week. It is absolutely pointless. These are just some of the reasons I'll be leaving my current school. I love my career and will always be a teacher. But my current school just doesn't seem to care about the kids anymore. If we aren't in this job for the kids, what is the point of any of this? Students are passed from one grade to the next regardless of what they've learned or what work they've produced. This is for grades K8. I teach grade 9. I have students who can't write incomplete sentences because they haven't had to write to move to the next level. Also, they think they will still be passed along no matter what they do. STEMANC 3-wire go. Edited 3-wire go. Bell curve grading. Doesn't matter how good your work is, they change your actual grade to be proportional to how others do to ensure a certain portion fail. In major urban centers, teachers that get caught doing terrible things don't get fired. They are furloughed or moved to schools in poorer areas where parents are less likely to research or complain. The teachers union protects these teachers more than the students. We are talking about teachers caught being perverts, assaulting children, verbally, psychologically, and physically, or other douchiness to other faculty. If we include universities, they regularly accept donations and money from private interest groups to push the interests of corporations. It's no surprise that certain companies I've worked for would pay or donate to schools to have their textbooks pushed as part of the syllabus. Sometimes they approach the professor and help finance his next book or study. Other times they approach the school and donate classroom resources. Vending machines in high schools are run by for-profit businesses that cut the school in with a rev share in exchange for selling sugar and highly addictive drinks/food to kids. Some states have pushed to have healthier options, but had to fight a huge uphill battle to get these predatory businesses out. Plagiarism. Universities are often given subsidized or free versions of plagiarism checking software that requires students to submit their essay to be checked. What you're not told as a student is that your essays are added to the pool of essays that this company now claims it owns the intellectual property on, meaning they make revenue off your essays and works and can use it as they want without having to pay you for it. It's disgusting that teachers copyright their syllabus, but students' rights to own the work they create and turn in is being dismissed. International student fees. Colleges and private schools have been losing funding. They've been subsidizing this by increasing the allotment of international students, which is fine, but they also keep increasing the cost. What costs locals $5,000 would cost an international student $15,000. They're also often required to buy additional services they may not need, simple to attend, mandatory meal passes, training courses and other marked up services to make a profit. On one hand, say they are against bullying, but on the other, they're kinda not. If you're a boy, boys will be boys, and if you're a girl, bullying is not even recognized half the time. I realize these days this is complicated due to lack of staffing, overcrowded situations, and other factors like cyberbullying. But this was a problem in my generation too, 1970s 80s. Popular handsome kids still get away with a lot more, but that's also life, so. There's a lot of pencil whipping, like marking things as done and checked off that really are not. Teachers are treated like garbage. With low pay, they are overworked, teaching overcrowded situations with new technologies that change every few years, and not always to the better, and always to the lowest bidder. US school lunches are abysmal. They are barely food. My son's cafeteria were mostly chicken nuggets, fries, and tacos. But the kids won't eat the nutritious stuff. Okay, but they don't like math and English half the time either, but you manage that. The biggest is Sol, which in my generation meant sheet out of luck, but for my son was standards of learning. Basically, schools are graded by how well a student does on these tests, so they spend 3 months a year teaching them how to do these tests, which, of course, makes the metric fairly useless. Also, if you have a learning disability, free field trip on testing day. All the IEP kids get to go to the library and are suddenly unpersons to keep the grades up. At the university level, professors make you buy their updated editions so they can monetize it. The differences between editions are a few pages. If that point also, tenured professors who abuse their seniority and not pull their own weight. It's obnoxious that some professors ride on a high horse of authority because they have been there the longest, might be the eldest. Definitely not the wisest. And very unlikable point. This is not an unethical example per se, but a sad example of the US public school system. Teachers spend money out of their already crap salary to buy supplies for their classroom. That's depressing point. Kids who can't qualify for lunches. What the fuck is our tax dollars going? The bloated useless high management administrative staff. The ego on some superintendents is ridiculous. Some of them run it like a political dictatorship. Point. Teachers teaching biases. Education and critical thinking is one thing. Forcing your beliefs on children is another. Schools cutting corners for salaries, supplies, technology, etc. or monopolizing them. My cousin went to UCLA and lived on campus. Paid for her dorm and everything. Pandemic hit, they kept her money, booted her out. Her classes went online and they charged her an technology fee. What's despicable is she had another class that was completely online and they still added a tech fee. Point. Just remember this one. Paid rankings for schools. Online for-profits are known to pay for rankings. If you had an IED, learning disability, in my school you would be forced to leave class during enrichment, a fun class, to go do extra reading, math, etc. I had a learning disability until like middle school, when I tested out of it, and it was always so humiliating being pulled out of class. It caused cliques to form at very young ages, and made it so the special kids are called out in front of everyone, making it hard for them to make friends. Not to mention that teachers don't even do their jobs. I never had trouble learning to read, but because I was put with the special kids I had to do extra reading for no reason, while the other normal kids were allowed to play fun team building games. Math I actually did have trouble with, but they could have had me stay after school or something instead of publicly embarrassing me and being mean when I couldn't solve a math problem. It's amazing how mean some of these adults are to special needs kids. It's a horribly faked system that accelerated much of my depression at a very young age, before I even understood it, and socially isolated me. I remember I used to be so outgoing when I was little. After around 4th grade I stopped talking to anyone. My parents even sent me to a therapist about it. That's how badly it affected my self-esteem. Not to say that was the only reason though. I still am very quiet to this day. One time a kid cried doing extra reading saying how it was unfair, and the teachers did not give a fuck and basically yelled at him. If you are a special ed teacher, or a teacher at all, please understand your words and actions will affect the people your students become. I still think about it, and I'm a senior in college. The most at-risk students are always the ones treated like villains. Edit TLDR special needs kids are pulled out of fun activities to do math and reading in front of whole class every day. Teachers often are mean to kids who have trouble learning, which affects kids' self-esteem. Kid is then bullied and socially withdraws, potentially accelerating lifelong mental health issues. The high school I went to was in a very rural small town in the US. Our day started at 7 AM, while the middle and elementary schools started at 8. If you had 0 periods or morning practice you were getting there at 5 some days, which meant leaving your house at 4 if you lived way out in the sticks. The explanation for our early start time was that they didn't want high schoolers sharing the school buses with younger kids. At a certain point the high school student leadership passed around a petition that got signatures from like 80% of the student body to move our start time to after the younger schools, so we would start at 9, still be able to run separate bus routes, and the teenagers would be able to actually function their first couple of classes. Some of the seniors put together a really strong presentation for the school board about the benefits of proper sleep for teenagers and the advantages of starting when the sun was up. Our superintendent responded by calling the high schoolers lazy and entitled in the student newspaper, cancelling their presentation and posting security to round up anyone not in class by the first bell and give them detention. The principal of the high school, a former Navy man who I think was trying to relive his glory days, called an assembly and told us that this was not how the real world worked and we needed to buckle down, toughen up, and not be so soft. There was talk about a walkout, but ultimately nothing came of it. Not sure if it's related, but the bus schedule moved 30 minutes earlier after this all went down, seemingly for no reason. It's been a long time since I graduated, but it still deeply bothers me. Charge application fees. There is a centralized application system for medical schools that are sent en masse to the school's admissions offices, which costs $300 plus to even complete. You then have to pay anywhere from $55 to $95 to add a school to the list where you want your application to be transmitted, and given the ultra-competitive nature of applying to medical school, most applicants apply to 30+ schools. The majority of schools then charge application fees for their school-specific secondary application, varying from $50 to $250 each, the vast majority of whom will never get reviewed or simply receive a silent rejection without an invitation to interview at the school. We are talking some schools interviewing only 400 of 10,000 completed applications for 200 spots. By my quick math, many medical schools generate $750,000 plus in revenue each year solely on secondary application fees, some over $1 millimeter. I come from a lower middle class family, and over the course of 3 application cycles I spent over $4,000 applying to schools to garner even one acceptance. The process is monstrously predatory and highly favors those from affluent backgrounds, which is in part why many doctors had parents that are also doctors. I straight up wrote in one secondary application to the medical school that one reason I loved them was because they did not charge a fee for their secondary application, and that it reflected positive morals and values that aligned with their stated commitment to serve the underserved. I was drawn to that given my background and commitment to help serve those from situations similar to mine. I ended up matriculating at that medical school. Not particularly schools, but teachers from my own experience. Notorious for asking other teachers or colleagues to gift good grades for their kids or relatives. My brother, for example, was a substitute history teacher in my school, and sociology teacher asked him to gift a grade to some relative of hers. I had an F in sociology, and she didn't want to gift me a positive grade so I can pass the year. Was actually the last one to give me problems. I was a graduate also. Another one was math teacher. I sucked at math. Had F constantly. One year I had to go to summer school because of it. She let me pass, but told me if I end up in summer school next year, I won't pass at that time. Naturally next year I have F the entire year. I wasn't making any problems. I was actually pretty uninterested. Didn't care basically. And she hated me because of it. So the entire year she was waiting to ruin my year. But there was a catch this time around. My sister, who is a psychologist, has a friend that works as a faculty professor. And can you imagine? There was a student whose mother called that professor all the time to beg for a better grade. The mother, of course, was my math teacher. And I mean, the chances of that happening. My sister and her friend the professor get in touch from time to catch up. And her friend was talking about that one lady that's basically harassing her to beg for grades for her son. And my sister then tells her that the same lady is my math teacher. Math teacher, by the way, told her that whatever she needs, she will do it for her as a token of her gratitude. And then we pulled that card. She asked her to basically cut me some slack. And man, what a change that was, overnight. After basically hating me for almost 3 straight years, she starts smiling, putting me in a position where I can easily cheat during a test. And the worst thing about both of them, or most teachers in general, is that they act as some moral figures, following the rules and things like that, when in reality behind the scenes, they're the same pieces of shit as anybody else. And it's all about the connections you have. Who knows who? If you don't have any connections, you're faked. If you do, then it's all good. Dress codes, especially when natural hair is against regulations. I was punished a lot in school for having puberty, so that's out too. Regulations that are impossible to afford or comply to given body type, like a specific kind of shoe that costs as much as food for the week, or girls not showing shoulders, or uniforms that aren't made big or small enough. Being told my natural body distracted boys and adult me? It's ridiculous. Punishments now. I had corporal punishments growing up, but that's not what I'm talking about. Being punished for not sitting still, being hungry, struggling with emotions. Not many schools cater to the why of a kid's actions. Just that they don't comply. Kids are starving and not getting enough sleep or time to grow at their pace is wage slavery / overwork / underfunded. Point teachers don't make enough to survive. Too many kids, not enough resources, too many demands, unreasonable expectations, and not enough teachers to do everything being demanded. Education should be one of the highest funded things everywhere, but the money that is spent isn't used for what it should be. Spend money on the future, on the teachers not the politicians, on the resources, not just the sports, on the kids not the tests. Food point faking. Feed the damn kids FFS. And feed them well. Weighted GPAs based on something other than the content of the class. My high school would let students get higher than a 4.0 for honors, AP, or dual enrollment classes. It was like a reward for taking challenging classes, and everyone in the class got it. Most of these were the gifted or extra work version of required subjects, English, math, art, etc., while others were electives, world history, physics, app art, etc. If you were applying to honors programs or colleges that cared about class ranking, you needed a rigorous course schedule as high of a GPA as possible, both weighted and unweighted. After I graduated, they stopped weighing app classes, unless you took the app exam, which had no impact on final grades, and which students had to pay out of pocket for. $100 per exam. Letter grades were 93 to 100 for an A, 85 to 92 for a B, etc. And the weighting was 5 points, the equivalent of almost a full letter grade. So even if you did the same work during the semester as your peer, but only they took the exam, you'd have the lower grade point. They also started adding honors credit if you took the same elective, specifically marching band and some business classes, multiple times. I guess the idea was to soften the impact of taking an elective class instead of a higher level one. No extra work was required, other than taking the class a certain number of times. I work in a school. I can name a few. Point teachers routinely cheat for students. They do it in ways that include writing coursework, completing practical work, such as music compositions or performance, or building woodwork projects. During the pandemic there were no invigilators, so teachers would tell the kids the answers in exams, or give them the same paper over and over to prep them. Teachers set exams last year. When I say routinely, I'm talking multiple teachers in multiple subjects every year. Schools often have racist dress codes, meaning certain hairstyles could get you excluded. No cornrows allowed. Dress codes are put in place to exclude. Uniform is so expensive it stops poorer kids going to certain school. Recently the school I work in brought in a black sock only rule and kids were getting detention for wearing white socks. Absolutely pathetic. What is that teaching them? What difference does it make? I started wearing white socks in solidarity with the kids. They serve terrible unhealthy food. The sourcing of the food is unethical, but also it is a crime to force kids to eat it. Kids on free meals have no choice. Schools should provide something nutritional. Sometimes there isn't a vegetable available at lunch. Point schools put results over well-being. I work with kids who read at a 6 to 8-year-old level, hate school and do everything they can to avoid it. Schools answer, stick them in 10 subjects that they will definitely fail unless the teacher can cheat for them, then send them off to college on a level 1 course and forget about them. All the while the kid's self-esteem goes through the floor and the mental health of young people gets destroyed. People don't talk enough about how school as an institution damage mental health. Education is ran by people who love education, so they can never understand that for some it does not fit, but instead of adapting to the thousands each year that school is a struggle for, they punish them and make them the problem, when in fact it's the system. I don't usually post, but fuck it today. I started a new school away from my local town. Private school. It's a mostly white Catholic school. I mean like in Brown. And there's about 8 of us out of 1,000 people. The first day I walked in, I heard the P***KIS are here. They would call us different names all the time and say, oh sorry you all look alike. Playing rugby, I was usually the main target as I stuck out. At first I never thought about it and left it until I grew older and I started mentioning things. My old head teacher, bless his soul, understood and always took our side when anything happened. But after he left, it was a pile of shit. Whenever my teacher spoke about 911, they would look at me. Walking across school, I would hear, "Watch out, there might be a bomb." I was told to shave my face as it looked weird compared to other students. I aged quite quickly. I'm glad I grew into a big guy playing rugby as I started fighting back on the pitch, but I would get in trouble. Some of my rugby teachers could tell what was going on and would either set it up so I could push everyone around, or would pull me and make me train harder. To the side point, I eventually hated my school as nobody ever took my side and I felt alienated. No matter what we did, we were always the odd ones out. Some girls' parents wouldn't even let them come close or be friends with us. I did have a few close friends who never saw my skin color, and one teacher who I would go to. He got me through school and into college. He made sure I did well, but my school didn't like him helping me out, as he would stay behind after school with me and then wait till my mum finished work to get me. My school never took it seriously, but what they did take seriously was when I would fight back or when I wouldn't take someone's shit. Apparently being the bigger man only applied to me. I'm so glad I had family who taught me stand up for myself and never take anybody's shit. Point, I think I had more of a rant, but I have never said this, and I started school back in 2002, so it's been a while, lol. What I have to say is simply a reflection of my journey. And you will find that what I'm claiming can also be verified in your own experience. Point, the school's organizational structure generally follows the rules of logic and therefore limits our human experience. Point, firstly, it's important to understand why logic or intellectualizing is vital in today's societies and why we aren't all talking about rainbows, unicorns, and magical possibilities. There was a point in human history when we favored the intuition or the emotional/feeling dimension of ourself. Intuition or irrationality is knowledge gained through our senses. Our intuition tells us that something is burning. It's that funny feeling we get right before a gigantic sneeze. How we determine the degree of temperature of our friend's pointer fingers, or the signals of pain behind food poisoning. Like anything else, intuition is something we can develop. Anyways, we found intuition wasn't ideal for making progress in making humans more comfortable or providing structure in the world. So, we abandoned our emotional side and favored our thinking, organizing, and progress-oriented mind instead. This disconnection from our intuition/emotions reflects today's society. We have forgotten the natural part of ourselves essential to feeling whole in selecting the mind. Today, we can see how heavily emphasized the intellect is. Not one course in the general school system is emotional. Do you see the imbalance? Of course, you do. The feminine side, the creative side of us, isn't nurtured by the school system because of our focus on logic and progress. The intellect has its purpose, but it is only one side to ourselves. Looking at the school system, we immediately see that what we think is conditioned through several subjects, namely science, math, history, and English. Generally, students learn these subjects linearly or according to logic. In other words, students receive guidelines to follow to reach the desired outcome. Creatively, our school systems deprive us. This is a problem. Eventually, if we don't have creative outlets elsewhere, we forget about our imagination because we are busy following rules. Because of the linear nature of the system, we may become mentally rigid and inflexible. We may begin to favor thought that is only linear. In time, we get so caught up thinking about how things should work and how we should do things that we forget about how limitless our potential is. Or, to put it another way, we aren't as imaginative. All of a sudden, because of this linear conditioning, we may begin to believe that the only way in life is to attend school, graduate, get a job, get married, have kids, retire, get old and die. We become brainwashed due to our innocent ignorance. We forget about our dreams because people tell us that life works a certain way. We let other people and their fear drive us away from our passions and interests. Remember that. Do you remember dreaming about being some artist, mastering a sport, being a janitor for your local zoo, swimming with dolphins, living in the forest with a sloth? Where did our dreams go? Where did the puppet sets go? Nap time? Recess? Magic? We utilize math formulas that tell us to get from point A to B. Science tells us that matter manifests from vibrations/subatomic particles to atoms, then molecules, cells, and eventually, we have a human or a cat. History is linear, and its general purpose is to remind us of the past to make progress. Language teaches us its rules, and aids us in communicating with each other. The school system says, focus on your grades. If you get good grades, the higher the likelihood of your success. This assumes that grades equal success. Do this, or it's not right, and you will fail. This assumes that there is a right and wrong. It causes undue suffering, and plenty of other limiting thoughts. In short, the general school system emphasizes thinking and being in a straight line. If we walk a straight line, we forget that we can look around, because we are so focused on doing things one way, following that line. We forget that there are infinite lives that we can pursue. In reality, we can walk in any direction that we choose. The school system makes us focus on this straight line. The school system neglects that we are equally a physical, spiritual, emotional, and intellectual embodiment of the universe, consciousness, awareness, etc. Again, do you see the imbalance in our school systems? The system is like developing a character on a video game with 4 bars named physical, 10%, spiritual, 5%, emotional, 20%, intellectual, 65%, energy. The build is utterly unbalanced and will make the experience seem lackluster. You probably would not want to play a lot of the time. If this was your building life point, I ask you to imagine your ideal life, because why not? My grade at school got a rap for being the worst grade to ever go through our school. Here are some things we did, and the punishments are 2 guys climbed through the ceiling tiles between the boys and girls bathroom to peep on females. One was on the football team. Football guy only got ice, inside school suspension, for a week, which meant he'd just be in a classroom by himself all day. Guy who wasn't on the football team, he had ice for a month and detention for the rest of the semester. A girl gave a guy a blue job in the back of a bus. She was expelled, but he was a football player, so only a week of ice. You could get detention for not participating in the Pledge of Allegiance or morning prayer, depending on the teacher. Unless you were a football player, you cannot give a football player detention, because it might interfere with practice. We also still have corporal punishments, so you could always choose to have our principal, who used to be a football coach, go at you with a sawed-off boat, or the ag department made him with holes through it for wind resistance. The worst one though was when a girl airdropped her nudes to everyone with an iPhone, and everyone found with those on their phone during the next class got corporal punishment. The girl got no punishment at all, because she was a cheerleader and her mom was the head secretary. And finally, the school counselor was a huge gossip, and if you went to her for help, everyone would know your problems by the next lunch period. I hate schools in the South. Lots of people will raise an eyebrow at this, but traditional grading methods are an unethical practice because of how they subvert a student's relationship with their learning. Instead of focusing on if a student masters a concept, traditional grading ranks students, punishes experimentation, a key part of successful learning, and moves a student forward, without additional support usually, into new concepts regardless of their level of understanding that concept's prerequisites. Traditional 0 to 100 percentile grades are the worst, since they also overvalue a student's ability to turn in assignments over a student's mastery of content. A single 0 for a missed assignment means a student needs to turn in 9 perfect assignments of equal weight in order to bring their grade up to a 90%. Even though completing 9 perfect assignments likely demonstrates an advanced mastery of the material. After a few missed assignments, many students give up, because even if they understand a concept, they cannot earn a decent grade. Being labeled a failing student usually becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why continue to try if you don't have much opportunity left to succeed? If everyone already views you as a failure, including yourself, then it's hard, especially for kids, to find the motivation to invest time in your learning if that same academic culture which enables your learning also keeps harming your self-confidence. Oh, one other point, traditional grading focuses on punishments more than they focus on rewards and motivation. In so doing, grades make it more difficult for students to view their teachers as a resource, a guide, or a cheerleader who is excited for their success. Grades become a weird abstraction for students, and it is never clear, even to teachers watch a norming session sometime, what B mastery might look like relative to C or B plus mastery. This leads to dramatic differences in grading between teachers. Teachers who correctly try to challenge students in a classroom often get viewed as harsh instead of supportive, because the stakes of our current academic culture value evaluation more than they value learning. What alternatives exist to traditional grades? There are lots more than I can mention here. If you are a teacher who is reluctant to step away from grading in a dramatic way, then even a simple 0 to 4 point grade scale instead of the usual 0 to 100 scale can do wonders to encourage students. A 0 to 4 point scale makes it easier for students who miss an assignment or try something new to minimal success to rescue their overall grade once they demonstrate mastery of a concept. Other alternatives like portfolio grading, which determines a student's success in a course based off of a final portfolio that demonstrates mastery, also work well. I'm personally quite fond of labor-based mastery grading, or contract grading. Contract grading takes a lot of forms, but in the iteration I use, students need to demonstrate they understand core concepts in order to pass my class. But if they demonstrate mastery of a course's content, then the student gets to control what final grade they earn based off of the amount of work they put in for the class. Basically, this encourages students to experiment without repercussions through the semester, since their final grade, assuming they demonstrate mastery, is based off of the amount of work they put into the course. As a teacher, my only subjective judgment is, if they pass or fail, no A, B, or C distinctions. At demonstrating mastery, I use portfolio style checkpoints. Otherwise, the student controls their grade based off of the amount of work they complete. This system isn't perfect, and sometimes you get students who put in a lot of work, but still don't demonstrate mastery, and hence cannot pass. But it cultivates much healthier conversations about learning and content in the classroom, since my control over their final grade is minimal, apart from an overall binary pass/fail assessment. Hiring people who don't give a shit about kids getting a higher education or a good school experience. Allowing classes to have more than 20 students per teacher, letting staff decide when students can go to the restroom/get water, not letting staff punish/expel kids who cause problems and slow down the rest of the class. Letting it be the parents' responsibility, even if it's clear the parents don't give a shit, unless their kid is being punished. Determining funding based on graduation rates, and enabling the habit of letting kids with sheet grades be bumped up to a C, rather than have them retake the course. Limiting options for electives to the point they are not really a choice. Banning things that don't make sense, rather than raising awareness of things, like banning water bottles, because it might have vodka in it, instead of teaching parents to monitor where their kids are getting alcohol, or enforcing a strict dress code on girls instead of teaching boys that women dress to look good for themselves, and it's never a cue to harass them. Slut shame girls. I knew some girls who were boobalicious at 14 being told to dress more properly, even though they were wearing the exact same uniform as everyone else and just happened to have a huge set of knockers they couldn't remove. Let the people who regulate the school district make a fuck ton of money just to enforce bullshit quotas, charging got textbooks and other nonsense that should be included when you pay for enrollment. Let professors use a book they wrote as the required text. Promote bullying. It's a bit of a long story, but I'll try my best to explain it. So this girl, let's call her Girla, she was being bullied by other people because she was lesbian. So with that being said, my teacher, Teacher X, put up a gay pride flag or something that made Girla feel at ease, and that she had somewhere/someone that accepts her for who she is. Well, apparently people didn't like that and reported it to the freaking office. I wish I was joking. The school talked to their lawyers, didn't even know that they had them, to see if he could take them down, and if it was in the law that they could ask him to take it down later on. The school gave Teacher X a dilemma, either take down the flag or be fired. He took it down, but later I came into that classroom and he was putting up rainbows, peace signs and hearts. School was mad. Not because of the rainbows and such, they couldn't do anything about it, but that he printed it out during school time. It was planning hour. For those that don't know, it's an hour that the teachers have off for planning OFC. A bit later he sent out an email saying basically how the school sucked. I agree, and that he was sexually harassed by a student. It took them 3 weeks to do something, so the school then said, either we fire you or you quit. He quit. He now streams on Twitch with about 44 followers. Unfortunately I don't know the name, and even if I did I wouldn't give it to the internet to protect my his privacy. Force children to go there against their will. Enforce arbitrary rules. Offer less support to state-funded students. Expel students that have been victimized by other students or are difficult to teach under the assumption that they've been badly behaved. Enforce gender norms on gender non-conforming students. Expect transgender students to do things according to their assigned gender. Force female students to wear things that get them unwanted attention. Get students into trouble for breaking arbitrary rules about uniform or presentation or makeup when they are otherwise well behaved. Serve poor quality or poorly cooked food at lunchtime because it saves money, because it benefits multinational corporations, or because it means they don't have to employ competent cooks or expect amateur cooks to follow recipes. Expect children to be indoctrinated into religions, but refusing to cater to their beliefs if they go against the mainstream secular practices of the school. Charge prohibitively expensive fees for schools that aren't run by the government, and describe schools that are designed to foster a wealthy elite as independent. Manipulate school education rankings by advertising high-achieving pupils and kicking out low-achieving pupils. Manipulate school quality ratings by forcing staff and students to be on their best behavior when inspectors visit. Tell students that they have to apply for university even though they know it isn't for everyone and are obligated to say as much. Teach sex education in the absence of any relationship discussion, but limited to human sex education. But it's worth bearing in mind that having schools teach the right kind of relationships might be worse. Refuse to acknowledge gay and trans students outside classes on civil rights or social education because they don't want to ruffle feathers. Describe charities that cater for poorer students as charity cases rather than questioning their own intake. Allow students to be bullied. Alienate students who are wealthier than most. Penalize students and families who can't afford to pay for things. Encourage students to believe that they will only be defended against students that are harassing them by other students or staff if they are well behaved. Mock students who aren't academic, yet allow students who are good at sports more extracurricular activities than those without. Have an equal number of women's toilets rather than an equitable number. Refusing to teach male students about female reproductive health, but expecting students with periods to attend in-person classes with male students during their periods. Timing exams like they're some sort of race at the expense of students with disabilities. Focusing on grades at the expense of their pupils' mental health. Conversely, encouraging students to see time off a subject/school as a good thing when they are into that subject or enjoy school despite its issues. Educating in ways that are insensitive to disabled students, non-white students, and ethnic minorities. Oversimplifying certain subjects to the extent of misleading people. Treating teachers as gods who cannot be questioned. Academ is changing the ethos of the schools that they take over comprehensives, using state education as an ideological weapon. Elite private schools expecting everyone to follow their traditions even when they are harmful. My middle school gym teachers were cruel bastards and beaches. I have a lot of stories, but the two I remember most relates to their indifference towards my pain. I was a clumsy kid, so I fell a lot. One day while we were outside on the track, I fell and had an awful gash on my knees and on my hands. I was on the other side of the track from the teachers, which I guess was too far, cause I yelled for them, and they ignored me. I couldn't get up because of the pain from the gashes, and, as I would learn later, a sprained ankle. Had to slowly work my way off the ground, walk to them, and ask them if I could go to the nurse. I was bleeding pretty profusely, so they let me go. The catch was that I would have to walk up some very steep stairs and cross a road to get to our school. None of the 4 teachers accompanied me. It hurt, but I made it to the school and kinda flung the door open. There, standing right in front of me, was the principal, Can't remember if she was vice principal or principal at the time, and a superintendent having a nice little talk. I got a personal escort to the nurse point. Next up, I have VCD, which means my vocal cords get stressed and try to faking murder me. It wasn't diagnosed at the time. We had these activities in gym class, where we had to run for 10 minutes, and then walk for 2 minutes, then repeat the process over and over again. My VCD didn't like this exercise. After a couple minutes, my vocal cords would completely close my airway. I'd try to keep running, but my legs stopped working cause of lack of oxygen, so I ended up collapsing on myself. This wasn't just a single incident. This happened at least a dozen times. Even when I was on the floor gasping for air, the gym teachers just told me to keep going. Point in conclusion, to my middle school gym teachers who were either completely indifferent to my pain or laughed at it, fuck you guys. I hope you one day experience what it's like to gasp for air over and over again without ever getting enough to let you catch your breath. I hope you feel your body giving out and notice how warm it is and how dark it's getting before you finally collapse to the cold, hard floor while the people around you do nothing. I hope you spend those moments trying to sob, but you never can because you don't have enough air. We have a zero tolerance bullying policy. Oh, you can't prove you were bullied? Tough digs. Go away. Bye. The time I could prove I was being bullied, I got reprimanded for saying mean things back to the people who were sending me death threats. Nothing happened to the others, but 100% of those kids ended up on terrible life paths. So I really feel like the school failed them. Point in a separate situation. After proving this other kid had been harassing me and my at the time boyfriend for months and the school refusing to take action, I slapped him in the face one time and was suspended for a week. Gave the kids fair warning too. If you don't stop him, mass slap you, no action taken for the other kid. Point there were also the teacher and students who displayed prejudice against various things, and those teachers/students were never handled. My friend was beat up on campus by students a number of times for being gay, but she was too shy to tell anyone. When I told the school, they wouldn't do anything unless she came forward. I also had a teacher that would shame certain kids for their alternate appearances. I hope the girl with blue hair was able to ignore his hateful words. I attended one of the top 100 public schools in the country and top 15 in my state. When I grew up and became a preschool teacher, I taught at a prestigious secular private school that ranged from a nursery to elementary, infants to about 10 years old, for you non-Americans. My boss was on a power trip like no other. She was a perfectionist, so everything had to be done exactly her way. But she was also the biggest hypocrite I'd ever met. She spent all day talking about the importance of what we do, but when it came down to it, she cared more about parent satisfaction than anything else. Boss refused to turn away sick children from school, and then constantly berated me for calling out sick. This was during a period of time when I was hospitalized because of the flu. It happens. She refused to use a preschool temp agency, an agency that employs licensed professionals, because she didn't trust them, but would also turn away applicants based on personal prejudice. There was an applicant who had the exact same pattern of employment as me, but with more education and more experience in the field, but she was turned away because she didn't keep jobs that long. She was a 20-something whose longest job was a year with no gaps in employment. I suspect she was turned away because of her appearance. We were constantly understaffed. Resources are limited. I was given $150 and an empty classroom and told to make it great. Also, 100% of the classroom cleaning, preparation, and decoration was done on our own time. We were not being paid. Boss played favorites between employees. One employee was over an hour late from her lunch break. This employee was late constantly. And I was the employee who was supposed to take my lunch after her. I was yelled at for not taking my lunch on time. Keep in mind, I was the only adult managing 12 children. I couldn't just leave. When she returned, I asked my boss what her excuse was for being late. My boss told me the other employee was in a car accident, but my boss was irate at me for being so heartless for my coworker's misfortune. I was sent home for the day because my boss didn't feel the kids were safe with someone like me. True quote. On my way out, I passed the late employee surrounded by other staff hemming and hawing over her. She was limping and holding onto her neck as if in severe pain. I walked to the parking lot and passed her very noticeable, brand new convertible. I looked at it very carefully and there was not a single scratch or dent on the thing. I handed in my notice the next morning. So this happened at my high school a couple years ago. One day, our principal thought it would be a good idea to hold an outdoor concert for us without telling us. For the entire week leading up to it, we weren't told it was gonna be anything besides an assembly, so none of us knew what it would be. So the day arrives, and we are told to go outside, and when we do, we see this. A row down the middle of our football field with pop-up tents on either side with sponsoring companies, and at the end was what looked like a cheap, inflatable stage. Mind you, we had no clue this was happening, so no one thought to bring extra water or food that day, because we all thought it was just gonna be a normal assembly. So, we walk out there, and the music starts, and let me tell you, the music was so loud that you could literally feel it in your chest from across the football field. So, I start getting a little bit hungry, and since I didn't bring a lunch to school that day, I start going to the booths looking for food. Reminder, we were not told to bring extra food or water that day, because we were not told there was going to be a concert outside. Turns out that the only food that they were serving there were takis, those spicy chip things. So I start looking around for water and guess what? There is none. So at this point I'm like, shit, what am I gonna do for food and water? So I'm like, shit, guess I'm just gonna leave and walk home. So I start to head out when a friend grabs my shoulder and tells me that we are not allowed to leave, or else it'll count as if we bailed from school early. And that's when I realize that our teachers have stuck us outside without food or water on a 90-degree day. For me, the rest of the day was pretty uneventful. My friends and I got as far away from the concert as we could and played Smash together, but for some others, the day was much more eventful. At least one, maybe two, students ended up fainting from dehydration that day and the paramedics had to be called. Yes, they ended up being fine, if anyone is wondering. Some of my friends ended up escaping in some cool ways, but I ended up staying the whole time because there was security around the whole football field and I didn't want to get caught. No one ended up liking it, but the principal ended up spinning it as if it was the greatest thing since sliced bread by getting quotes from students who either helped set it up, the leadership community, or from the literal 2 students who actually enjoyed it. Literally, it was obvious that at least 90% of the school hated it because that's all everyone seemed to talk about for the next couple months, hating the concert. So yeah, that was my first concert experience. TLDR, school forced us to stay outside on a 90-degree day to listen to incredibly loud music while surrounded by ads without food or water. Today this was told during our assembly: stay up late and up until the morning, drink that cup of coffee to keep you up so you can get those good grades and get into a good college. I was internally infuriated when hearing that speech as someone suffering horribly from severe depression, of which school was a huge factor of. I was encouraged to take on a load of app classes because it would save me money and look good to colleges. It only took one bad teacher in a regular level class to make me close to being admitted to a mental hospital. Why? Well, they crammed a crap ton of lessons into a small amount of time with a teacher incapable to teach effectively and efficiently enough to handle it. Don't blame the teachers or the counselor. If you work hard enough, you can do it. Our school admin proceeds to say having good grades is a privilege. I have the privilege to have parents who prioritize my grades, to live in an environment that allows me to learn how to regurgitate the answers onto a sheet, to have the confidence to ask questions, or have a teacher of which would allow to ask them. I would trade the amazing GPA or the praise I get for my grades for a better mental health, for time to truly live my teenage years. To be confident I lived my life to the fullest and not waste my time on marks. To develop a skill that I could excel at. To be able to sleep and not try to extend the day as I need more time for that assignment or relax. Schools prepare you for a stepping to learn skills for a job, yet not for life itself. Not letting students eat in class, like not a full loud meal, but small snacks. Used to sneak little pretzels on ups in a baggie in my sweatshirt pouch cause I always felt dizzy and food seemed to help. Found out later that I naturally have super low blood pressure and I was self-medicating with salt. Would start falling asleep or get dizzy without it. Pulling girls out of class for stupid dress code violations. I once got in trouble cause my sports bra strap showed on the inside of my uniform polo. It was a baggy polo shirt and I had on a sports bra cause I had to get on a bus right after class to head to a tennis tournament and wouldn't have time to change completely. Just pull off polo and slip on tennis tank. Had tennis skirt on under my uniform skirt already. Got sent out of math class and had to wait 25 minutes in the dean's office for her to come see me and be like, what the fuck, that's a dumb call by that teacher. Go back to class. Of course I missed the class where we reviewed stuff before a big test that I didn't understand and couldn't go to after school tutoring due to tennis, so I just had to accept that I wasn't going to do well on that test. Way to put education first. Also, this was an all-girls school and I was 14, so who exactly was looking at my bra strap? Oh yes, the 60-year-old math teacher forcing kids to ask to go to the bathroom. Can't you wait? Oh yes, let me explain that I'm currently bleeding out or have stomach issues in front of a class of 30 people. That's healthy. The amount of homework, no one talks about it at my school. We had so much homework it was insane, and we had a big problem with people being competitive with academics. Like, everyone felt super pressured to fill their schedules with most/all the app classes they could on average. My friends and everyone I would hear talking about it in passing would pull at least one all-nighter a week. We had 5 to 7 hours of homework a night. Genuinely, it was insane. No one would acknowledge it if brought up. Every single teacher I had would be like, guys, you don't understand, I have to grade papers when I get home. How do you think that makes me feel? I'll give an example of a day's worth of HW in my sophomore/junior year. Math, no matter what level of math, was 15 to 25 problems a night. You had to show work for each one. Like, a paragraph's amount of work would take an hour if you were fully focused. History, a quiz every day, so every night you had to read the chapter, 10 to 12 pages of textbook, and take detailed notes for the quiz tests every 2 to 3 weeks. Essays once a month. English, read 30 to 40 pages of a novel every day, and also take very detailed notes also about an essay once a month, and maybe 3 or 4 projects a year. Science, biology, or chemistry, usually worksheets with problems that were most likely packets 2 to 4 pages long, or read a chapter from the textbook and answer the 5 to 7 questions at the end, each a paragraph worth of answers, usually a quiz the next day on it. Elective, always some type of homework for electives. Couldn't get an easy class, usually a worksheet or something. Usually you took 2 electives. Tests and quizzes constantly every day. You had to study for 1 to 3 classes that day. You study in between every class, during study hall, during lunch. We were all doomed when we graduated. The burnout was insane. At least in the U.S. I can't speak for the rest of the world. Teach based off of testing and ranking as a country, rather than to teach useful topics and making sure we get something from them, rather than just memorizing facts we'll forget the second the test is done. Not letting students use the bathroom and expecting us to during the little time we have to eat. Not being able to defend ourselves. Have such a low cute offline for free/reduced lunch programs and its other benefits. I know many friends whose parents were very poor, but made just enough that the school wouldn't allow them into the program. Same thing with financial aid in college. Going further about college, the fact financial aid and income standing is based on your parents' income at all, when most parents, besides the rich kids, won't pay a dime. Dress codes, especially for girls, force group work. I understand the skill to work with people you don't like, but the grading should still be done independently, not as a collective, and have a low grade, because John didn't feel like doing anything. Lack of proper standardized set shed. Many states require abstinence only in many schools. In states that require more, just don't even abide by it. I didn't have it all in high school, class of 2019. Lack of health services psychologically and physically. Counselors that actually help their students in distress, and nurses that don't just send a kid away with an ice pack are vital. Cost of sports for both the school's income and expenses of the students. New uniforms at $1,000 aren't needed every year. The excessive funds set aside for sports, because of American culture alone, could pay for so many more useful classes and support programs. Common Core in general. We don't need the same English class 4 years in a row with essentially no new information. Nor does every kid need to know calc. Having those options available is great, but mandatory is ridiculous punishment for falling asleep. Their logic: student is missing out on lecture material, so they should be punished by missing even more lectures, rather than helping the kid and trying to address the problem. Having no seat belts on buses. Only vehicle besides a limousine that doesn't need to follow safety laws. Dietary standards for cafeteria food. It should not all be processed and packaged from the cheapest corporate vendors. There's plenty more, but that's just from the top of my head. Sideline children with special needs. My stepson has multiple mental health diagnoses with serious behavioral issues. He had been kicked out of a lot of elementary schools by the time I came along, when he was 7 years old. His mother pleaded with the administration of every school for any help that could be provided. At every one of the meetings, of which there were many, no one ever mentioned IEP or wraparound services. Individual education plans provide a great deal of additional services and support for special needs kids, and must be provided to kids who need them. Wraparound services provide coordination of mental health services, schools, parents, and connects the whole family with needed resources. I can say without equivocation that my stepson would be much healthier and happier today if these had not been concealed by administrators. Oh, did I mention that we only found out about either of these forms of assistance completely by accident when an outside healthcare provider who was not school staff mentioned them in passing at the end of a particularly rough meeting, earning them dirty looks from the higher-ups in attendance. Point: if your family is struggling with a child who suffers from mental illness and/or behavioral problems, you have to advocate for yourself. Demand the services that schools are legally required to provide to children who need them. In my school, there were prefects, teachers who they were at least 4, and would send you to the coordinator's office for any physical contact you had with any other person. You couldn't kiss, hug, sit close, etc. to any other student. It was absurd, because they would send you, even if they were wrong. Also, the coordinator was a stupid and disgusting dude who called prostitutes and promiscuous the girls they catched. Even more disgusting, the director was a woman, and even if she knew this, she wouldn't say anything. She has a close connection to the principal of the university. And the high school where I studied added a rule at the end of my generation. We had to give them our phones. Every classroom has a wooden box where they would store them by roll number and lock it. For any emergency, parents need to call the high school and someone would need to come and open the box if you had to leave. Also, with the new online classes, there was a horrible teacher who wouldn't let us record the classes. Luckily, they made her change that, but it was at the end of the semester, so there was almost no difference. The uni said that we can record all classes, and no teacher can deny this right. Great ending. My university has a rule which says that any creation we make during our student time can or will be taken by the uni. They have the right to claim it. I think they haven't done that, but they make you claim that it was thanks to them, even if you used little to no tools provided. They have student programs, but they are mostly for learning, not creating. P.S. To be clear, most important high schools here are connected to the most important uni. They have some kind of monopoly. Also, we often used to use phones to search for info, games, related to the class, etc. It was a really useful tool, but even with the cameras they have in every classroom, they decided to punish all of the students for the people who use them as distractions. Letting staff, or anybody, for that matter, without teaching licenses substitute classes. It was when I was in 7th grade. My whole 4th period math class, which was also my homeroom, had heard that a certain staff would come in and be our substitute that day, and we all groaned in dismay. We knew who he was, because he had a reputation for getting kids in trouble for no reason. A story I had heard about him once was he searched a girl and her friend's backpack, just because they were going to the bathroom with their backpacks during lunch. Sure, I get not bringing entire backpacks to a bathroom sometimes, preventing any type of violence, but it turns out they were both on their periods and had explained this to him in tears of embarrassment. He searched their backpacks anyway. Another story, he tried slapping a kid across the face because the kid and their friend were playing tag in an unrestricted area. The kid dodged the smack and left to tell the office point back to the main point he came in, and it all ended up with him not letting any student use the bathroom. Not even the student teacher from the high school, who had eventually flipped him off and left anyway. Him confiscating 5 water bottles from only girls in the class. Every guy who had one got to keep him making 2 girls sob. To this day I still have no clue what he said or did that led them to sobbing. Him stomping on a kid's backpack. It doesn't even matter what the reason was. Again, I don't even know. That's just cruel. So eventually, since he hadn't let any kid out to use the bathroom, my best friend at the time and I took it upon ourselves to try and sneak out to the office upstairs and inform them on what was going on. Another friend of ours covered for us by running out of the class, so he'd chase after them, giving us time to sneak our way to the office. It had successfully worked, and when we made it out, we told the lady at the front desk what was going on. Once she left, we turned around to see our entire homeroom class had followed us. The girls sobbing had still been in tears, and the friend who had covered for us had made it safely with the rest of our homeroom. A few minutes later, the vice principal comes out and tells us all to sit in the auditorium and talk about what had happened. We let her know. She said she'd get right on it and to go back to class. I raced back to the room to see if he was still there. He was, and I saw him sitting on one of our tables, chuckling hysterically with his palm on his forehead. I told everybody to wait a few minutes as he was still in there. Once he left, we all settled down, not knowing what to do, and comforted each other, trying to register what had just went down. To end the story, the vice principal came and taught us for the rest of the class. The last I ever heard about the guy was the fact that he was fired. When something happens outside of school and the school somehow gets involved. For example, my friend and another kid were fist fighting on my friend's lawn and the school bus drove by and boom, they both got suspended. This has happened so many times to me that I can't even remember all of them. Not the fist fighting, the school getting involved. The main one was me and a few friends prank called the school pervert because he took pictures of one of my friend's girlfriends in appropriate places, and we threatened him to delete them. The kid told his parents about it, and that he didn't have any pictures, and that he was scared, so his parents called the school to report it. And do you know what the school did? Encourage the parents to let them take it to the police. So long story short, our school has some sort of contract with the police, so they can ask them for favors or something like that, I don't know. And after them not listening at all to our side of the story, we had to talk to a police officer. Also, I should mention the school knows this kid is a pervert, but he has good parents, so he would never get in trouble. Anyway, this somehow went on my permanent record. If I had any evidence of what happened, I could probably sue them for this corrupted sheet, because that seriously faked up my life in several ways, because we tried to get some photos deleted. I faking hate some people. I'm going to jump in and interrupt all these horror stories with something a teacher did for which I will always respect her. 5th grade gym, running laps. Couple laps in, and I felt horrible. But of course I didn't tell anyone, because I'm a man. Men don't show weakness. We get back to class and our teacher begins reading us a book. The whole time, I was sweating, dizzy, couldn't seem to catch my breath. I imagine I looked miserable, but again, I wasn't about to show weakness by asking anyone for help. I noticed during reading time that the teacher kept looking over at me with a concerned expression. I can't recall if she interrupted reading time for me or finished it and then did the following in a rush, but what matters is that she shifted my safety to her first priority. After reading time ended, on time or cut short, can't remember, she immediately approached me, concerned about me. It didn't seem to take much, but my stubborn determination to be a tough guy easily melted away as I finally admitted I didn't feel well at all. She asked the students to line up and escort themselves to lunch while she brought me to the nurse. Turns out I was having my first of many tachycardia episodes. This means that my heart was beating at an insanely fast rate. The EMTs came and took me away in an ambulance. I don't dare ask my mom how much that cost her, and I remember my teacher telling me as I was wheeled away that she would be praying for me. I'm fine now. The heart condition got way worse until I had an ablation surgery on it going into high school. I did once dare ask my mom how much that cost. Not a happy number. The heart condition became a defining factor of my adolescence and caused a lot of trauma, including severe bullying and some particularly scary episodes during which it seemed neither heaven nor hell could regulate my heart rate. But the counterpart to those horrific middle school experiences is the core memory of my 5th grade teacher doing everything in her power to help me as soon as she sensed something was awry. I will always remember her for that point. I've since tried tracking down some way to contact her, but only hit dead ends. It hurts to know she's out there somewhere, and I have this message of adoration and thanks for her, but I don't know how to get it to her. Mrs. Bendixson, I'm almost positive you will never see this. You are amazing. You made a massive impact on me. I'm sorry that, in our time living in the same area, I didn't have the maturity to realize and express to you how much I appreciate all you did for me that day. Thank you. Using religion in studies, but doing so in a manner it's not a religious study. This is just a sheet thing to do. I had to listen for 2 years of a cunt who'd say God gave us these elements to work with, so let's see what we can do with them. Then there's the girls' dress code, which had nothing to do with boys. Instead, this code was another attempt at pushing religious agenda, or worse, ensuring grown male teachers weren't turned on. It always started with young ladies don't dress like this. To be a female in the American education system must have been a nightmare. But let's not stop there. We also get to classify some teachers as outright assholes who refuse a student the right to the restroom. Why? It'll disrupt class? GTFO with that sheet. Thankfully, I had some teachers that had a rule. If you have to do, just go. No need to ask. Not a single disruption from it. So if you're an asshole preventing a child from going, find a new job. Now rounding off my list, using books which are factually inaccurate, paint the US as some glorious country, and pounding the propaganda into the minds of children who grow up to be some of the most stupid humans on the planet. Don't tell me this isn't a coincidence. I'm appalled our education board is run by fascist assholes who work to keep the kids of the lower class burdened with homework and studies which do nothing to help them actually learn or think. This became evident when Common Core was distributed throughout the United States. Not only did parents have a problem with helping their children understand homework that made no damn sense, teachers were frustrated because there wasn't a single curriculum instructing them on how to implement this bullshit. Now one of the biggest failures of education in American history, schools across the nation are mixed, leaving our students in one of the worst situations, and all of it was faking deliberate. I truly feel for the young of this nation. They don't stand a chance. They have no cognitive abilities to stand up for themselves, and they've been turned into a product by the most destructive political group in US history. Doubt this? Look up Betsy DeVos. While no longer in her position, the damage has already been done. It'll take years, if not decades, to erode what this Republican cunt has done. In my country, not letting kids go to the bathroom. Not letting kids drink water without asking. Overloading kids with homework to the point they're sleep deprived every day. Teachers gossiping among each other about kids. Teachers gossiping with kids about other kids, and teachers slapping, caning, and pinching as punishments. Sometimes punching and kicking too. In my school we actually have 6 major exams per year too, and it's stressful as fact to everyone. Not to mention having brown parents too. Not letting kids have a sense of individuality, like letting them accessorize. Boys have to have hair no longer than the thickness of their fingers. Girls can only wear small stud earrings, and it has to be either gold or silver. No colored watches. Only 3 hairstyles for girls. Only shoes from 2 certain stores. Uniforms. No jewelry. No makeup. Expecting students to have lunch and go to the bathrooms. ECT. In just 15 minutes. Not allowing kids to be in relationships, and if they have proof 2 kids are dating, the school will call the parents and cause a huge scene, and the 2 are humiliated. They actively hunt out relationships and check bags on Valentine's to see if anyone's sneaking anything in for their significant others. I don't know if it's unethical, but honestly I feel like it is. We are not allowed phones. I feel like it should be allowed, cause people need to call/text their parents after school when they are going to after school tuition classes, and these are just off the top of my head. Thanks for reading, haha. Sports making it so teachers feel immune from punishment. Okay, I'm disabled, autism, mild cerebral palsy, underdeveloped muscles, hypotonia, so I took adaptive packaging that is allegedly supposed to be easier. My fellow students included 2 people with Down syndrome, a guy with moderate cerebral palsy, and a girl with Fragile X. We had a piece of sheet teacher, who was also the wrestling coach. None of us were allowed to call him Mr. last name. We had to call him coach or he wouldn't hear us. Every year he would bring us to the weight room and say, okay, if any of you can lift the bar, the thing you put weights on and bench press, whatever that is called, you'll get this $20 bill. Of course he knew that none of us could lift it. He'd do it every year, though. None of us were allowed to opt out. We had to do it. He'd silently laugh while we tried to lift it or say that it hurt. He'd tell us, well, I need to pump you up. Look at how weak you guys are. Then, one year, one of the kids with Down syndrome lifted it, and he was beaming. He asked the coach for his $20 because he wanted to buy some candy. Coach told him, I'll bring you your $20 tomorrow. I need this for gas after school. Coach never brought him his $20. He kept saying things like, oh, I'll bring you it tomorrow. Sorry buddy. On days the kids with Down syndrome weren't there, he'd mock them, telling us about how they weren't normal like us, etc. One day he had someone he called his friend bring in ripsticks, surprisingly, not drugs, some kind of weird skateboard that looked very difficult to use, and he told us we had to do it, and we had to miss ping pong danger, or we'd get in trouble. He also said that, if we did it, he'd bring us a whole lot of candy, and the other kids were so excited, especially the kids with Down syndrome. We all fell a bunch of times, and we only had helmets, and coach and his friend were laughing the entire time at us falling down. He had us do it in the tennis courts, so some of us kept slamming into the fences. 2-point coach would also make us run the mile whenever he was bored and wanted to read the newspaper. Last I heard, coach was still teaching at the high school because wrestling, but he was no longer teaching adaptive One of the very nice gym teachers who always took us adaptive kids into her class, 2 to 4 gym classes, excluding ape, were taught at the same time. Whenever coach was absent. I believe coach was removed from the position because he made up fake goals for our IEPs, then claimed he had done them, gave us the highest marks possible, which for some of us weren't possible, so yeah. I've been waiting to answer this one. My high school administrators swept a series of incidents involving faculty members harassing or attacking students under the rug in an effort to save their ass. One student reported a teacher for hitting him, and the superintendent, we were a small school, said that he preferred to keep it hush hush so as not to damage the school's reputation. Another time, the principal, small school, so district principal started screaming at a student because they were throwing a crunch bar in the trash. She didn't want food in the classroom. A shouting contest ensued between a faculty member's daughter, who pointed out the DP's hypocrisy. The altercation ended with the student trying to leave the classroom to the front office. DP blocked the door. Student pushed DP. DP, in a rage, screams your llama witness is like a lunatic, and chases after the student. While the rest of us, that is the class and the teacher, were trying to figure out what just happened, an argument can be heard in the front office between the secretary, the nurse, and the DP. The arguing student and the DP were sent home for the day. The student was unfortunately suspended for something that wasn't even assault, and the DP was put on paid leave for 2 whole months before being forced to resign, so that neither her nor the district's reputation would be affected. As far as I know, she still has her principal certification and is still able to work. At my high school, the superintendent used to pride our basketball team, despite the fact that they never made it far in the championships. As a result, he would ensure that any athlete that got in trouble would be let off the hook as soon as possible. During my junior year, a senior, this shameless 5 feet 6 inch podhead was caught with a vape. while the non-athlete would be sent to an alternate education program for a month. This one was only suspended for a couple of days and was back on the court after a 1-game suspension. Something similar occurred with another athlete, except the vape was found in the student's truck by a nosy community member who wasn't even employed by the district. The district, as a whole, was just terrible. They were out of compliance with state requirements for fine arts, supposed to have 2 fine arts options, but only had 1. Its special education department was extremely understaffed. They've seen almost their entire elementary staff replaced, as well as their junior high, and they even went through 3 district principals over the course of 4 years. My school had 2 semesters, one in winter and one in spring. I was unfortunate enough to have gym class in the winter semester and they wouldn't change the activities for anything. We also were required to wear a strict uniform which consisted of a short sleeve shirt and shorts in very specific colors. No pants or jackets or anything else allowed. So yeah, you can imagine this made playing sports outside on the sports fields very dangerous in the middle of winter with snow on the ground and it being below freezing out in shorts. I would regularly come back from class with hands that were a deep red color and my joints in my hands were completely locked up from the cold, which I believe is the beginning stages of frostbite. These same teachers also made me run the mile, even though I had a doctor's note saying I couldn't participate. I had just gotten back from a long absence after having heart and breathing issues. They made me run it anyway. I ran for about 1/4 of the mile and almost passed out, so I stopped and walked the rest of the way. I was heavily berated for this and threatened. These same teachers also threatened to put you against the wall and have people beat you with dodgeballs because I didn't want to play prison ball anymore after a jock kid whipped the ball so hard at my face that I got a black eye and bloody nose from it. Those jock kids would regularly whip the balls so hard they'd sound like a gun going off when they hit the opposite wall, which was padded by the way. In America, specifically from teachers that really care about the pledge, enforcing the pledge. I remember in middle school my band class had this old 60s 70s white man who co-taught with the younger 30s to 40s Malaysian women. I had this class as my homeroom, so we did the pledge every day. So one morning, I think sometime in late winter, the morning announcements played and the cue to do the pledge began. The guy in this story was one of 2 black kids in this class. He stands most of the time, but this day he didn't. Big mistake. This old white man begins to lecture him on respect for this country. The teacher that actually did stuff was the woman. I should mention they are married, and their last name starts with M, and she barely added on. She was more like, yeah, people from different cultures get cute off by Mr. M. After this 3-minute lecture he takes the kid outside, and I think he talked to him and did his normal "I'm old and I hate the lower bands because I've been to school for 10 years for this self." 40 minutes later, and he comes back in. While he was gone we were just doing class as normal, because to be honest he just sat around playing kids' instruments that were playing wrong and everyone was waiting for his inevitable retirement. Back to him coming back in, he kinda just sat down for like the 7 minutes left in the period. Forgot to mention this, there were 2 other white classmates that sat for the pledge. Personally I stand for the pledge, just because it's what we are doing up until recently where I've been too tired to stand, so I kinda just sit. TLDR, a kid in my 6th grade band class sat for the pledge and sat outside for 40 minutes. Schools care about test scores, not your grades. If a kid has a 23 in a subject and another kid has a 55, the school will put more effort in getting the second student to standard because he actually has a chance to pass the test. God help you, if you're really struggling in a subject and you need help, you probably have to go outside of the school to get it. Passing students who don't know the materials. This hurts everyone. Students who didn't do well in Algebra 1 will do worse in Algebra 2 if they don't know the material. That can be incredibly frustrating for the students. Meanwhile, teachers have to try to get these students who shouldn't even be in that subject up to grade level somehow, which can hurt their evaluations, even when both parties are amazing and try their best. Students get away with lots of bad behavior that will not be tolerated outside of school. Whether it's swearing, constantly arriving late, not doing work, or something as serious as screaming at the top of their lungs while throwing papers everywhere, letting students get away with this sends the wrong message. School is supposed to prepare students for life. If any student tried this in their job, they would be fired. Some of the offenses would have them be arrested. That's absolutely terrifying. The first time students get real consequences shouldn't be when they are getting sent to prison for hitting someone because they've gotten away with it for 10 plus years. Today my kid had online class, Ontario, and his teacher in yearbook class, yes folks, it's not a club anymore, it's a class, showed a picture and asked her students what the problem with it was, except this wasn't some arty photo. It looked like Sheila, Karen and Phyllis after church service. 3 rando women under fluorescent lighting in a hallway saying cheese point. But why after church? Because over Phyllis' shoulder was a picture on the wall of Jesus. So the whole class is mentioning that the face over the lady on the right's shoulder is throwing the balance off. How to fix this? Photoshop it out. Point my son is like, but that's Jesus. It's literally Jesus. If Jesus is in the photo, there is slightly more than small chance they believe in Jesus. I doubt anyone would thank anyone for redacting their Lord and Savior from their casual social snapshot, even if it did balance out the photograph artistically. Suddenly the picture was gone, but FFS, of all the open copyright easily accessible beautifully shot photos in the world, what the fuck? The last picture she had them discuss was this piece with a handful of out of focus black and white tulips against a black background and an in focus colorized soap bubble. My kid asked what he was supposed to say to the question what makes it a great photo, when it was clearly garbage. Tell her it's not a great photo. List the reasons it isn't. I'll back you up. Point. But this shit happens all the time. The kids are told what they are meant to think or believe, and will be punished if they disagree, unless they have a disabled mother with nothing else to do. Then when your kiddo gets accosted by the principal for literally putting their hood up 2 meters before going outside in Canada, the principal will say, "Don't make me give you detention." And kiddo will say, "Don't make me call my mother." And principal will blanch and walk away. Point. I am just as ugly a fucking badger on the behalf of the teachers who are good, of which my kid has had a good handful over the years. The way schools approach the behavior of boys is very damaging and unfair. Boys are expected to behave for 7 or 8 hours a day in a way that is diametrically opposed to their nature. Little boys are full of energy. They are supposed to have physical altercations with other boys and establish physical hierarchies. Fighting is normal, picking on each other is normal, playing pranks is normal. There are so many things that little boys do or want to do that are treated as misbehavior early on and as criminal acts once they get in middle school or high school. Another problem with the approach to male behavior in schools is the predominance of women as teachers for early grade. 76% of public school teachers are female. Boys and young men need male role models in every aspect of their lives who can set an example for them, and many boys do not get that anywhere. What I'm describing overlaps with another huge issue in schools, the school to prison pipeline. The normal behavior of children should not be punished in the way that it is in America. Zero tolerance policies punish both the bully and the bullied. In fairness to the public school system, many issues begin in the home, and that should be just as big of a priority for our nation to address. Some would say this view is outdated, but I believe there should be one parent who is capable of tending to the home full time. Median salaries in this country should permit that. And that parent can absolutely be the father, or the mother, or whatever, either parent in a same-sex relationship. It just would do so much for the betterment of society if wages for one worker could support a household. I'm a teacher. Here are some of my favorite: employing subs for essentially minimum wage with zero benefits even for long-term placements, because they were hired third party and not directly through the school. Most states require that school districts pay subs a salary and provide health insurance if they are employed for more than 30/X days by the district. Hire uncertified subs/teachers and pay them more than certified subs and teachers. Requiring new teachers to pay into mentorship programs where a colleague mentors you and they take $500 out of your paycheck every month or so during the school year for maybe 1 to 2 meetups a month that are essentially check-ins and do not require any proof said colleague mentored you. Mentorship hours are also required in many states in order to maintain teaching certification, even though you passed all the exams, paid all the admin fees, and have related college degree. Forcing teachers, subs, and staff to work in unsafe and unhealthy working conditions in the middle of a global pandemic. In addition to this, they also have not reported covered numbers or ignored reports in order to keep schools open, allowing students to video record, photograph teachers, and installing cameras to monitor teachers, but not allowing teachers or schools to have cameras in classrooms for safety purposes. Not to mention these students often post said videos and photos to Reddit and other social media making something up about the teacher, potentially getting them fired or their license revoked over false accusations and depictions, but not reprimanding the child when caught or allowing teachers to file suit against them for libel or defamation. This is pretty minor compared to everything else, but thinking back on my experience, the short amount of time given to change classes in my school, it was 4 minutes. It was a decent sized school, and one half had a second floor. If one class was at one end, and the next was on the opposite second floor, forget going to your locker, or using the bathroom. I remember the strain of 3 classes worth of books in my backpack, because of this all too well. Unfortunately, bus pickup was on the same schedule. My bus was part of the first wave. One year, my last class was on the opposite side of the school. Class let out at 3:10, my bus left at 3:15. I would literally have to sprint to reach the bus on time because they would not wait. A couple of times we would have a pep rally at the end of the day. The first time I waited until the end, and lo and behold, my bus was gone. Okay fine, except I lived a 40-minute drive away from the school. So, since my little brother rode the same bus as me, I had to wait 40 minutes for him to get dropped off, then another 80 for the round trip for me to get home. This is why missing was such a huge deal. I ended up having to leave school early to get to the damn bus. If a pep rally happened. Apologies for the length. Point being, I don't think a few extra minutes to change classes would hurt anybody lol. Allowing teacher/staff to get away with picking on/bullying certain students over their personal issues and look the other way and blame the kid when kids were clearly being abused and neglected at home. Can't tell you the number of teachers that gave me failing grades for not being able to complete a project, or because I didn't have anything to write with. My parents believed girls didn't need school and only need to worry about being a good housewife, and would refuse to get me any school supplies since it's a waste of money to them. Even had a school counselor tell me I clearly deserved the abuse and I was just going to drop out anyway and get pregnant, then told me she didn't have time for useless hoes like me and to not bother her again. I surprisingly was able to do well in school when I got older and learned how to get my hands on supplies on my own, and she had the ability to look it up but didn't. My husband had a super religious and racist teacher that refused to teach what she was supposed to, science in grade school, and told him he had a demon inside him that only she could exorcise out of him, and regularly would kick out and bully any minority kids and auto-failed kids that didn't believe in God enough. This was a public school too, not a Catholic or some religious private school. And performed a couple exercises during class if a kid acted out. But she had some sort of setup that basically gave her immunity to do whatever she wanted and not worry about being fired. I don't remember what it's called. So all parents could do is complain to the board, but nothing would be done about it. Any zero tolerance policy. Zero tolerance is a way to avoid any responsibility or having to put in any effort, and solely there to protect the school from any claim of favoritism. Give teachers one plan period, 44 minutes or so, to do all of the planning, grading, and conferences required to teach 6 classes. The average teacher works about 20 hours outside of their school day. So 60 hours a week. Teaching requires a bachelor's degree, and a first year teacher makes about $35k, $40k, average across the nation. That pay is already ridiculously low for the educational requirements. Private sector you can expect to make about $50k, $60k with a bachelor's, but when you consider the amount of hours worked it becomes poverty wages. Most teachers have to work during the summer or nights to make ends meet. That is ridiculous. Schools don't provide supplies or materials. My biggest class size is 35. I have 38 textbooks. Each student does not have their own book. The history department does not have enough textbooks for everyone teaching a subject to have a set for their class. So they have to sign out the book cart, and if you also need books those days you are sole. Not all books are electronic yet, because access to an e-textbook requires a license that must be paid each year, where they can buy a physical textbook and use it for 20 years. Every child must be nurtured sounds good on paper, but in effect, what has happened is that they have removed all consequences for poor behavior. They are incentivizing students to act out. Point in short, the biggest unethical behavior of schools is that they are no longer preparing students for their next phase in life. In fact, they are doing just the opposite. They are hindering students' ability to move on to either college or the workforce. This generation of students leaving high school will be the most unprepared, ignorant, and dumb. Ignorant is not knowing something, but dumb is not even knowing how to ask a question to learn something. The anti-bullying tactics schools use are so outrageously bad, they almost actively promote bullying. As a teen, 12 to 15, I got bullied in private school seemingly for no other reason than because I didn't fit in with the rich kids. It happened on the bus, in the classroom, and in the halls during breaks every single day, more often than not in front of teachers/hall monitors, and no one was ever punished for it. So one day, I decided to do what all schools tell you to do, talk about it to an adult. They sent me to see the nurse, and she told me, "I'm making none of this up. Tell them firmly to stop." What kind of an idiot do you think I am? Do you think I haven't already tried that? However, she also asked me to give her a name of a bully. Finally, someone gets punished. I thought. Emphasis on thought. No, it was conflict mediation. You know, the bully and the bullied pretending to get along, just so the person in front of them who acts as if she's never met another human being to try to make them friends would stop wasting both their time. Point obviously, that sheet didn't work, but now, not only did I snitch, I also showed them I rely on others for my own protection. I became an easy prey. No punishment if you bullied me, and I wouldn't defend myself. So, one day, I snapped. After the guy behind me on the bus threw an apple at the back of my head so hard it broke on impact, I immediately turned around and hooked him on the side of the head, smashing his head on the window and giving him a concussion. Point I was sent to see the principal the very next day. I explained everything to him, named everyone, gave all the details. Nothing but detention for myself. That school basically enabled the bullies, however, by giving another kid a concussion. Suddenly the others stopped bullying me and just plain ignored me instead. So every time someone tried to make fun of me, it was detention time for me. TLDR, schools basically enable bullies and inadvertently promote violent self-defense. I'll bump this up to the collegiate level and student loan practices regardless of what your position is on forgiveness or partial forgiveness or whatever. Let me paint you a picture of how the student loan/financial aid process worked when I was in college in the early 2000s. As a student you register for classes and labs and receive your expense total for class plus books and lab fees etc. Let's say it total $2,500 for the semester. You don't have that, so you go to financial aid, fill out the required forms, and speak with a counselor, a fellow student working in the FAR office usually. They review everything and submit, and congratulations, you qualify for government-backed student loans and they will give you $6,000 for the semester. But I don't need that much. I only need $2,500 FAR. Oh, it's cool, you can just pay the difference back to the lender, or you can hang on to the money and use it for next semester. So here you are, a young adult who's maybe never had that much money and don't know how to manage it. What they also don't tell you is that when you go to the lender's website to try and pay back the difference, there's no option to, because you don't pay loans back while in school. It's deferred. Another fun benefit is that your FAFSA was good for the school year, not just the semester. So spring rolls around and bam, here's another $6,000 to try and manage. As beneficial as available student loans potentially were, once the government started backing them, it allowed universities and lenders to push them hard and obfuscate information and realities to millions of American youths that were told their entire lives that the only way to get ahead in this country was to go to a 4-year university. Full disclosure, I graduated with about $40k for student loans and made my last payment in September. I still support some form of relief and reform for the program, but that's a problem with no one right answer. The once a bad kid, always a bad kid practice point, for example, to me as a 2nd grader going into the 3rd grade. He had Mrs. Smith as his 2nd grade teacher and will be soon joining Mrs. Gonzalez's 3rd grade class. Before the beginning of the school year, the two teachers discuss the students joining Mrs. Gonzalez's class, particularly focused on the problem students. Mrs. Smith tells Mrs. Gonzalez about the trouble she had with Timmy in the 2nd grade. He would act up, would stop paying attention in class, and would argue with Mrs. Smith regularly to the point where Mrs. Smith had given up. Timmy ended up in the principal's office almost weekly toward the end of the year. Hearing this, Mrs. Gonzalez expects the worst out of Timmy and decides she won't tolerate any acting up from him starting on day 1. As expected, Timmy acts up, and Mrs. Gonzalez does not tolerate it at all and immediately sends him to the principal's office, citing his behavior from the previous year. Mrs. Gonzalez continues her zero tolerance policy with Timmy all year, and the following school year shares her experience with Timmy with Mr. Jenkins, Timmy's soon-to-be 4th grade teacher. By high school, Timmy has become forgotten and uninspired. He doesn't bother putting any effort in at school because he knows no teacher will have the patience to help him if he does. If Timmy even graduates, it will be just barely. This sort of story happens to so many kids in public school systems. They get labeled as a menace in their early school years, and that label gets carried with them permanently. Sometimes these kids get lucky and have a teacher who decides to do the right thing by working harder to make them succeed, but more often than not the underpaid, overworked teachers simply aren't willing to expend the effort. The year after I graduated HS, my wife, who was a senior that year, said there was a kid who was attempting to kill himself in the bathroom because he was gay, and the school is a private Christian school with a zero tolerance for anything LGBT. When the kid got caught, the school, instead of doing anything about finding this kid help for the suicide part, not the LGBT part, they held special chapel sessions that week where they gave talks about how 1. Being gay is wrong, and 2. Having accountability groups to help bring the kids who may suffer from the sin of being gay back into the light of being not gay. This amongst other things, including stuff about mental health and actually looking out for the students, led my wife's class's valedictorian to speak out at the last chapel, where seniors could speak and stuff, before graduation about how shitty the school and administration is toward mental health of students. The parents of the seniors who attended that particular chapel, as well as other students' parents, got so butts that the school they paid thousands of dollars to every year would allow a valedictorian to speak about such things. They managed to get the school to literally bar the kid from not only speaking at graduation, but even attending her own graduation. My wife said her class rallied around their classmate, but ultimately the girl was not allowed to set foot on campus that day, and the school ended up having one of the most unsuccessful graduations that year, as almost nobody from her class showed up to graduation point. And what did the school learn from these experiences? Nothing. They still hold the same stances. Compliance with horrendous nutrition education, and no options in cafeterias for those who choose to get their nutrition from plant-based sources instead of animal. I strongly believe there should be an entire mandatory set of classes from kindergarten to high school, just for nutrition education. It's only like the most important faking aspect of health and self-care. The rampant misinformation about veganism and varying nutrition sources is also just something I'm so sick of dealing with as a vegan myself. We also need to educate kids about BS food advertising tactics. The only reason we don't is that every parent likes to get offended whenever diet education is brought up. It's classist. You're judging me. I know nutrition. Don't talk down to me. I'm a good parent. etc. Also, there's just too little people out there fit to be teachers on the subject, as it's so fucking complex and everyone likes to inject their biases and opinions into it instead of looking at it objectively. It always gets turned into something political somehow. It's so fucking dumb. For example, even home ec is barely a thing anymore because people found it sexist, so I had like zero education on how to cook for myself and fucking starved my whole childhood. Thank God I got to have it for a year, so I learned how to sew and repair clothes. Just make a class for studying foods and recipes. Make it varied and always accessible to vegans, so vegan kids know how to do it right and don't just get harassed with ignorant misinformation. Bonus if the class can teach about how farming and agriculture works, because shady shit is going on that no one is aware of, and most people don't know how to depend on their own skills even the slightest bit anymore when it comes to food. Seed banks critically diminishing because no one's supporting the small companies or doing their own farming. Rampant deforestation for unsustainable animal agriculture being the biggest cause of ecological damage. Health problems related to diet ravaging the population. These issues need to be brought up in schools. Solar punk future. Tons and tons of stuff. I could probably write a book on every single point, but in no particular order. Collective punishments. A single or just a few students do something stupid and quickly the entire class or even the entire school is punished for it. Point ineffective against bullying. The way some schools handles bullying borders on madness, especially when the victims of bullies are punished for instigating trouble. Teachers also play favorites according to their own preferences and are generally pretty oblivious with how some students really take point homework. Depending on the type of school you visit, you can be in school for up to 8 hours a day, same as a full-time job, but then you can also easily get up to 3 to 4 hours of homework on top of that. There isn't much left of the day once you're actually done. Even worse is that some teachers clearly give out homework simply to give out homework. Generally there only really exist 3 kinds of homework. The homework meant to repeat what was taught at school, which should always be optional IMO. The homework that prepares something for next hour, which should never be necessary IMO. And the homework that's just to keep you busy, which should not be a thing. Social grades. Now this doesn't exist at every school, but at some schools you are graded on your social performance. So if you are a loner, perhaps because you've been made a designated outcast, or are being bullied, congrats. You will also get a poor social grade, because you don't get along with others. If you're the class clown or cool guy, congrats. You will get an excellent social grade. Point grading subjective stuff like sports and arts. These things are extremely subjective, and the amount of utter BS I've heard from teachers to justify their arbitrary grading has been truly mind-boggling. It also plays into the social grading. If you're an unpopular kid and during team games you get ignored by your teammates, you get a bad grade for that. Same with arts. You can put all the effort you can muster into your paintings and the teacher can still say it's trash and give you a bad mark. And it's not like math or a language where you can at least get by if you memorize things. Building up proper art skills takes a lot of time, and a few hours each week aren't enough. Point restricted access to bathrooms. This is something that feels almost unique to schools. The way that you have to ask permission or for a key to be allowed to use the restroom. I don't want to dwell on this point, but it's really messed up to me. Point now perhaps 3 more controversial opinions. The use of authority. It is drilled into students to obey authority, and that feeling of power over others can really get to some teachers' head. They will take joy in displaying or proving that they have power over their students. They can use it to punish them. They can use it to shut down discussions or unwanted questions. They can use it to make unreasonable demands. They can use it to bully students, and know they can get away with it. I really wish teachers would be more accountable for some of the stuff they do. Point propagandize youth. Schools teach with an incredibly biased perspective on the world across all possible topics where it applies. Social issues, religion, class, history, and even some others. There is heavy bias towards certain politicized ideas. In some ways schools do border, if not simply are, indoctrination camps. At my school we were often taught to think critically and for ourselves, except for certain topics where questions weren't welcome. Point it's really sexist. Haha, no, girls aren't at a disadvantage. Boys are, utterly and demonstrably. In some countries the male teacher is even on his way to extinction. Girls have so many advantages over boys, it's little surprise that academically females have overtaken men overall. Point I could probably find some more, but that was already some satisfying venting. Quiet/secluded good children being forced to control the loud or troubled kids and or getting punished for not keeping the troubled kids in line. Point happened to me twice. Point once, I was forced to sit by a kid who made me extremely uncomfortable. Just regular growth kid things, like taking apart his PB plus J''s then licking it off the bread, but he was very loud for an entire year. No seat changes like the other kids got each month. %100 sure she only put me with him because she wanted her troubled kids to control each other. Same teacher who let a class decide if a 7-year-old was still allowed a b-day party after they had a meltdown. Cough cough me cough. The second time, it was my best friend. She'd wander off, go to the bathroom without talking to a teacher, or just generally disappear for a while/misbehave. The teachers would ask me, without fail, where she was each time. Think at least once per day. To the point where I was just expected to have tabs on her at all times, even when she told the teachers where she was going. Same teacher who told me I had to hang out with her less so she could befriend more kids. Also, being punished for defending against bullies. A kid came out along about getting punched, proceeded to lecture all the girls in a specific grade for an hour about talking to them first. Oh, I got a list recommending to doctors that a student be treated for AD/ADT when they have no medical license to diagnose. That point keeping the child away from the parent. Point calling the police on the parent when they are lawfully taking them out of school. Point forcing a child to take any kind of vaccination on site without the parent's approval. I don't care if it's for COVID-19. Minors require parental consent. They did this for HPV as well, so this is an issue before COVID. It's the parent's responsibility to properly vaccinate the kids, not the school. Student debt, i.e. lunches and library books. Calling the cops on a student. Point forcing students to take sex ed when the parents have said no. Point forcing students to pray to any religion without parental consent. Point having school security tackle students having school search lockers without consent. Point holding live shooter drills with dogs and intimidating students with police and said dogs not properly notifying parents about emergencies or disciplinary acts. Withholding water, bathroom breaks and proper medical attention from students. This is just off the top of my head. Public schools are just not held accountable for anything anymore. If I was a parent, have a lawyer on retainer for my kid when they go to public school and make sure they've got some kind of emergency phone that teachers don't know about to call me. I was abused by my dad and neglected by my mom. I didn't take it out on others, but was seen as easy prey by bullies. I'd take retaliation too far. They put me into anger management due to it. When they do, that they sacrifice quality lessons on multiple subjects. I still maintained an above average SAT score nevertheless. Anyway, they also lock the students up into safe rooms for being disruptive. I eventually got away from that and into honors. Only for a few months later, to be picked out of a hat by either the principal or vice principal. I don't know, never met either of them. When they woke up the next morning and recognized my voice and accused me of some bomb threats. Essentially the school took a kid from a bad home and made school a bad place too. Kid still works, but often gets invite from first choice college, just to be thrown into jail for someone else's crime because all the adults were too lazy to figure out who was calling bomb threats. School administration was switched out the following year. The district was just trying to bury me in the event. Few years later I came to find out that there was an FBI raid on a house a mile down from the school a week later, and pipe bombs were found. I never found justice. Never finished HS, but got some classes at the local college. Never could get the right grades for any programs I wanted, while having to work minimum wage jobs to pay my own rent because well, parents. Currently an EMT though. Edit. To summarize, I spent more time in jail for a crime I didn't commit than my dad when he tried to kill his family. The school decided that point. Also schools can honor an expulsion, meaning all schools in the area can decide to not give you an education if you're expelled under criminal charges. Meanwhile colleges won't accept you without prior education. So the only place I even could get an education outside of online JED classes was the jail as an inmate. cracks knuckles well. In the world of higher ed, if you are accused of a Title IX related offense, harassment, sex assault, dating violence, etc., punishing an accused student, even though he was not clearly eyed as being there during the incident, a dark bar, and all witnesses support the accused student. Roma v. Washington State University, female student asks for sex in writing, text messages, male student still punished for non-consensual sex. Doe v. Occidental. Accused student expelled without notice or a hearing of any kind. Caldwell v. Parker University. Alleged victim is not the accuser, denies she is a victim of dating violence, and is threatened by school for defending the accused. Bomeister v. Ainsley Carey and others. Immigrant studying on student visa, deported to homeland after female student gives him a BJ, and then claims rap. Doe v. Pennsylvania State University. Both accuser and accused student are drunk, have sexy time. Only male punished due to incapacitation. Doe v. Amherst. Accused male is drunk, female accuser is sober. Female accuses him of rap for switching from vaginal to anal without her consent. Claims his being too drunk to remember the sex is no excuse. Doe v. Haas. School changes the definition of sexual misconduct in the middle of the investigation to find accused student guilty. Doe v. Pennsylvania State University. Student found not guilty by school, but school refuses to release hold on transcript, lift suspension, rescind no contact order, and instead fights him in court. Doe v. Illinois State University. School refused to hear from witnesses who claimed accuser had a history of false allegations, refused to see video evidence. Doe v. Ohio Wesleyan University. School changes date of hearing when they learn exculpatory evidence will be presented in a parallel criminal hearing, so they don't have to use exculpatory evidence to potentially find the accused student not guilty. Gilias v. Appalachian State U. One of panelists deciding whether the accused student is guilty is a friend of the accuser. Accused student objects, but school refuses to replace panelist. Bleeler v. College of the Holy Cross. Fraternity support of accused student is characterized by the university as plotting. Sorority support of accuser characterized as supporting. Doe v. Rollins College. Accuser admits initiating sex. Accuses male student of rap. Claims he should have resisted her advances due to incapacitation. Makes coherent text messages shortly after rap. Farah v. Indiana University. Accuser texts friends celebrating a consensual sexual encounter, then later claims rap. Male student punished. Doe v. Western New England University. Male student files complaint days before female student files complaint. School ignores male complaint entirely and punishes him for female complaint. Doe v. Austin College. Upon accusation, student imprisoned in a basement of the university by campus police. Fayez v. Colgate University, and many more. So, I see that the top post is the fact that colleges force students to purchase new textbooks or codes to have access to the publisher's website. Yeah, this is egregious and super common among colleges, but not necessarily unethical. Most professors really try to make the course affordable the further you get into college. From my experience at least, professors generally know that college has gotten more expensive every year and hasn't really acknowledged inflation at all in their tuition. I was a public school teacher for 8 years and now I'm getting my doctorate in English teacher education. I would argue that the biggest unethical practice in education is scripted curriculum. It's in its infancy now and is going to become the norm if the public doesn't address it as an issue early enough. I had to teach a scripted curriculum 1 year, and I'm seeing the writing on the wall in my state to make sure that teachers teach only the narrative that the state will allow. Yes, critical race theory is part of this. A teacher from my hometown was recently fired for not showing both sides of the argument when showing a slam poetry performance wherein a young black woman was describing her experiences with systemic racism. Despite that being the headline, there is a real slippery slope that can occur if we let one topic reinforce the government's ability to script every word of the curriculum. Teachers won't be allowed to teach critical thinking outside of the parameters built within the curriculum, and we could have a real 1984-esque scenario on our hands. I became a teacher to open up students' minds and help them build an inquisitive mindset and a love for reading. being quite aware of scripted curriculums and their lessons and objectives. I'm certain that the script writers do not have the same goals. Not every county is doing this, but ask your kids to ask their teachers if the lessons they are getting are part of a scripted curriculum, and I imagine most would say yes. The implications of this being left unchecked are, in my opinion, terrifying. Blaming teachers for the bullshit that administrators and school boards cause. I promise you that we teachers wouldn't uphold most of the crap because we have enough to do. We don't care about dress codes unless we are in my lab. Then for safety there are certain things you shouldn't wear. We don't care if you wanna wear your hat or hoodie as long as you're paying attention. I don't care about homework unless you really need the additional practice. I don't care how many times you go to the bathroom. Just don't bother me if you played around in the hall and missed too much of the lesson. I don't care if you eat in my class. Just clean up after yourself and don't eat in my chemistry lab for safety reasons. I don't care if you're on your phone. Again, just don't bug me if you miss something, and if it's new material I certainly will make you put it away unless you can show me you already know how to do it. We hate state mandated tests too. I personally don't even care if you use profanity as long as it's not done maliciously. I teach high school, and so I need to help these kids learn how to take responsibility for and manage themselves, because shit's about to get real once they graduate. So yeah, it's hella unethical for people to tell us teachers how to run our classrooms, and you haven't been in a classroom in 10 years or never even been a teacher. My high school would send home letters to the juniors and seniors stating that if your grades got below a certain point, I think it was 68 and lower for more than 3 classes, that they'd contact the DMV and have your driver's license/learner's permit suspended. They did this for several years, but because the school had it printed on official county letterhead and had some bullshit fake DMV rule quoted, everyone believed them. My junior year I went through what would be the first major depressive period of my life, then undiagnosed bipolar disorder and some other stuff, and I'd basically go to school, sit and stare all day, come home and go back to bed and stay there until school the next day. All of my grades except for Latin, history, and English lit suffered badly. I had turned 16 the September my junior year started, and that January my grandfather bought me a nice little old car, which was the one thing that seemed to bring me joy. When the school sent that letter stating that they'd contacted the DMV to suspend my license and that my parking privileges had been revoked, it was like being hit by someone bigger than myself. My mom believed the letter, so we parked my car at my grandparents' house under a tarp from March to June, and I had to take the bus again. June comes along, and I had just managed to get my grades up so that I passed everything, and my mom calls the DMV to find out what exactly we need to do to get my license back, and the DMV says they'd never heard of me beyond seeing in their system that I have my license, and that there are no active complaints against me or my driving status, and that the school doesn't have the authority to revoke licenses. My mom saw it, but unfortunately school was out for the summer and there was no one there to call and complain to, so we've just had to deal with it ever since. And I'm not the first one they did it to, and so many people believed them. It was a gross abuse of authority and power. How many students and their parents are going to question their school? The zero tolerance crap, where bullies get no punishment, a comparatively light punishment or the same punishment as a victim defending themselves, is pretty bad, but I'd say the worst is schools covering for kids in sports and who are members of those families in small towns. If your kid is being picked on by a sports star or some shitty little rich kid in a small town where shit's named after their grandpa, their dad and uncle sponsor half the teams and people think the sun shines out of his ass, here is what you do. Go to the state police and apply for an emergency protective order and press charges of simple assault, harassment, whatever you think can stick. It's important to make sure your kid documents everything, but if they did, this can work. Note that you go to the state police, not local, and your reason is conflict of interest with reasonable fear of retaliation. Have it served to the kid at school and his parents at work, simultaneously. in most states, won't be jack or shit the principal can do about it, and you can have even your cheapest legal aid or university law clinic lawyer send a letter to the principal informing them that requiring your child to leave school as a result of charges filed against someone who has committed a crime is a violation of their right to a free and appropriate public education, FAPE, and violates their right to the least restrictive environment. Use those exact words, and for the duration of the protective order, that bully can't come to school. Consider what that does to academic eligibility for sports, or to a rich kid's reputation, when they're forced to stay home, but aren't well supervised, and get themselves into worse trouble their parents can't hush up, or sweep under the rug. Consider too, that doing this to a bully whose parents are ordinary people, who isn't old enough to stay home alone, you just dropped whatever the magistrate winds up deciding the fines are for assault, harassment or similar, plus any punitive damages, and common local magistrates can be merciless, especially if your kid documented that mess carefully, and the school is found to have failed to protect them, plus the costs from either missing work, to watch their little crotch dropping or somehow arrange emergency daycare on no notice. Obviously, this is a brutal tactic, and should be reserved for brutes. It is very easy to get a bully beaten, abused, sent into the horrific troubled teen industry or simply thrown out by his parent by doing this, to cost a single parented bully their parent's job, to stick the bully with a criminal record at a young age, which doesn't leave them, and in cases where the school administration, the parents or both are genuinely humiliated by the experience. You can absolutely end student athletic careers, remove student privileges, and generally take a child of privilege's life from feast to famine overnight. Accountability is a harsh thing at times, and though the retribution may be absolutely proportional, correct, and appropriate, the feelings of fellow students may be more than somewhat outraged, or, if the bully had multiple targets, there may be understandable rejoicing. Use it wisely. My parents, I sometimes wish they hadn't. Not exactly about unethical practices, but still. Currently I am 19 and doing a voluntary social year at a school with children from the age of 11 up to 19. On the first day, I have been told that the students were told I would be the auxiliary teacher for this year. And usually, it is fine, because I'm only working with children up to the age of 15. But since the holidays we are short on staff. So I'm assigned to a graduation class for some courses like art. And oh boy, it is hell. Because for the students I'm a young average looking teacher in the late 20 feet, THX to the beard. I'm giving marks. So about 20 students are very willing to do a lot to get their grades up. And all of a sudden most of the girls wearing tank tops in the winter and are sucking and licking the sheet out of their pants. Or let them fall, so they have to pull over to pick them up and give me the best look of their butts in the smallest hot pants I have ever seen. Today we had pair with another class. So the other teacher came over and asked why the heck all my girls would wear leggings and were stretching extensively and intensively, smirks and went. One girl even asked me if I could help her stretch and asked if I could do anything against her so-called lower back pain. My colleagues are quite aware of the situation, mostly thinking it is amusing and I should come back with some real problems, and yes, I cannot deny to have some fantasies. This may have changed now, and may be region specific, but where and when I was growing up, elementary schools lasted the whole day, so you'd eat and sleep at schools. The table has an extra flip platform, so kids can sleep packed like sardines next to each other on cold hard wooden tables. Anyhow, I was a pretty nervous kid, and I usually had to go pee when I was nervous or anxious. And there was a rule that during noon/nap time, you should not disturb other students and therefore, no potty allowed. Plus, I think they were worried kids went playing at noon instead of napping. So there's that point for most other kids. This was probably okay, because they fell asleep within like 5 minutes. I never slept in any of those days, because I was always a very light sleeper with much difficulty. And it was nerve-wracking, because if I don't sleep, I might get anxious about turning around and waking up other kids. You get punished for that, and in turn I'd get the urge to go potty. Since the rule was no potty breaks, I had to hold it in so much, until one day I actually had problems and my parents asked what was wrong. I told them, and my mom went to meet with my homeroom teacher and requested that I be allowed to go potty if necessary. She mentioned I had some conditions. I don't know if it was true, but I did, and still pee a lot more often than others, even when I'm not stressed. Anyhow, that was my story, and luckily, that worked out. Since knowing that I could go pee when I needed, I actually felt less nervous and didn't need to go as much as before. I have my mom to thank for that, but anyhow, what an absolutely stupid and harmful rule. For the first 5 years of primary school we had a Christian headmaster. We had assemblies 5 days every week, which straight away is as stupid as it sounds when other public schools I've been to, transferred during year 5, have only 1 or 2 assemblies each week. This school with the heavily Christian headmaster also happened to be a public school, so the only reason I can think of for this is that the headmaster was trying to force his religion on us 4 to 11-year-old students, because approximately 95% of these assemblies revolved around him, and he would constantly quote the Bible. He was also a massive narcissist. He would tell us these probably made up stories about these heroic acts that he did. I don't know if it was to inspire heroism in, or to make him look good in front of his students. Now I'm not against Christianity or any other religions, but this school has never been titled as a Christian school, although it is located right next to a church, and it makes me feel now as if he was doing it behind our parents' backs. He also went by the saying 2 wrongs don't make a right. I was heavily bullied in this school as well, and even if I told a teacher, it rarely stopped. But then, just like any other school nowadays, if I ever stuck up for myself I was the only one who would ever get cheat for it. Now here is the bombshell. When I was in year 4, around 8 or 9 years old, I was diagnosed with autism. It isn't as bad as it once was now, but back when I was a kid I was very weird and vulnerable, and that's why I was bullied so bad. When my parents got into contact with the headmaster to ask him to hold an assembly or at least do something to spread autism awareness, I wasn't the only autistic student in the school either. He treated it like it was taboo and never did anything about it, so the bullying only got worse, and because I had no idea what was really going on, I got my hopes up for some kind of autism awareness assembly and was super disappointed when I realized it wasn't happening. My parents finally decided to transfer me to a different school a year later, and I finally started to feel like I was actually in a safe place again. That old school got a new headmaster a few months after I left, since the Christian one retired at the age of 60, and within a few months he seemed to massively improve the school from what I heard from my brother. But the old headmaster, Mr. P.E. Moon, if you're somehow reading this now, which I doubt you are, since by now you'd at least be 67 years old, and you were always a massive boomer, fuck you. Edit. Sorry I went on a bit here. I didn't mean to tell my entire life story, but I'd prefer to tell this from my personal experience, because I believe my years in primary school were unethical from 8 of the 10 angles. Edit #2 realized most of high school was unethical as well, but don't even get me started on that point. Thanks for reading. Oh god, here goes. When I went to infant school, there were so many things wrong. A kid got told off for walking weird because he needed soft insoles in his shoes, and we were going down a ramp. This kid was made to stand at the back of the line. That was like a horrible punishment. Then you had to walk past everyone to get there. I remember a teacher tripped over me and then proceeded to blame me for me purposefully tripping her. I had an allergy to pears. That's not as bad now. They did fruit bowls, and most of the days they had pears in because cheap. That meant everyone else in the class got a piece of fruit, and I was left out. It wasn't difficult. If you think I'm being snobby about it, they regularly gave apples to the older classes, or better classes, and had frequently given me an apple in my class's bowl. They just forgot for like half a year. There was this nun teacher. We weren't a Catholic school, we were Muslim, which is weird, because I'm not Muslim, and never have been, and also this was Northeast UK. My town is 97.8% white. I looked at the census. Anyhow, this woman was weird. Think Miss Pickwell from Bad Education. She once told me off for knocking 3 times in a row. Weird. Beach Point, they regularly held fire alarms in the middle of lunch, and we weren't allowed extra time to finish. After a different fire alarm, we had to stand outside for an hour. I had been telling the teachers frequently that I needed to go to the toilet, and eventually it just got to a point where I pissed myself. Note, I was about 5 at the time, but still. We were the last group to go in, which is weird, because we were the youngest. I got bullied a lot, and no one did anything. The parents were frequently racist to the Muslim population, audibly said the N-word in front of us, and shouted swear words. None of the teachers did anything. I left when I was 6. Another thing, why does homework exist? It is the teacher's job to teach, and if they cannot do that well enough, then don't teach. Don't impose restrictions and punishments on homework. I got so many detentions for not handing in my work, it's so stupid. Many of the teachers would not set homework, and there was an incident where I was off for a week and nearly got isolated for not handing in my work. I was actually at home vomiting. I don't have the brain power to focus on homework. I'm planning on getting tested for ADHD. I literally cannot watch YouTube without getting distracted. How do you expect me to sit down and do work in an unregulated environment? I'll sit there and move from thing to thing, and you want me to do work I struggled with in class, in a space where I can't ask for help? No. Ooh, I've got one. Actually several. Florida students are measured in FTEs. About 27 years ago I was teaching dropout prevention. Our kids were considered 1.5 TES. Each FTE is a number value the school collects in cash. I was young, naive, and didn't know what an FTE was. One day I had over 1500 kids listed on my roster. The principal assured me they wouldn't really be there, but it was important to have them enrolled in dropout prevention. School made bank on that. Also, when interning I was paid nothing. My supervising teacher was suspended on drug charges. They left me alone in the classroom, and when my professor came to observe they put random guidance counselors in the class to make it appear legit. They should have hired a sub. Afterwards they didn't even give me an interview in an effort to hide the evidence. The principal in case 2 was eventually fired. One of my principals got fired for falsified test scores. Honestly, she was so stupid I can't believe she actually scored higher than the middle school she worked at. First 2 times she did it she got reprimanded. Last time was the last straw. Another teacher was requiring debate students to go to her camp over the summer. It wasn't cheap. Her husband owned the camp and the principal got a cut. They both got fired for letting her sell food from her class and allowing a student to transport thousands of dollars alone to the principal's office. The nurses at my secondary school would deny kids help, even if they had diagnosed medical issues. I have a complicated disorder, which means I have extremely above average period pains and other period symptoms, but to a severe degree. By the end of my 3 years at this school, I had lost track of how many times I'd been sent back to class crying my eyes out from the severe pain. My mum called in literally every month to re-explain it all, but they would never faking listen to us. Also, the nurse's office door wasn't soundproof, and I once had to listen to the head nurse sheet talking me and complaining about how many times I'd asked to go home. I've heard her talking about how she thinks students are faking. I talked to a girl in the year above about this, and she said that the nurses would even claim she was faking when she'd faint due to her anemia. They would also try to get me to take pills that I know would have zero effects or would make me worse. I told them every time, yet they would pressure me to take them anyway. OFC, this isn't everything that happened, but this is sheet off of the top of my head. So glad I left. Honestly, fact that school, it also caused me to develop several mental health conditions to a severe degree, but that's a whole other story. They can definitely be improved in almost every way. I got 2 examples here. Cheaping out and not properly punishing employees. I'm asthmatic, so I would need to go to the nurse more than most people. When I was in 1st grade, the school had this big woman who looked kind of like a gorilla as the nurse. Whenever I showed up, she would always say I was faking and send me back to class. This included showing up with a fever, wheezing, difficulty breathing, a cough, etc. Eventually she called my mom over to the school so she could tell her that I was faking all this, which I wasn't. But when my mom showed up, she looked one look at me and knew I was sick, told the nurse that she sucked at her job, and took me home to take proper care of me. I'm glad that nurse got replaced not long afterwards. Although the replacement did have her problems. She obviously didn't know what she was doing, but she could tell if you were sick and had the sense to call parents. Then again, this was the public school that got shut down, creating the first county with no public schools. Schools really need to have a higher bar for employees. Corruption of the higher ups is a problem too. I went to a private school after that. It still had its problems, although was much better. I also grew up on the lower end of the financial spectrum, but me and my siblings are all very smart, which is how we were accepted into that school in the first place. They did this lottery every semester, where they would draw names from a hat on caught you being good tickets. Me and my siblings were very well behaved, but every semester it would be the name of a rich kid that would be drawn, usually the same 3 or 4 kids each class. I only won something once, and my brother won something once. I literally did not notice when my name was drawn. I was thinking another boring lottery with the same names drawn when I heard it. I didn't react because it was just another rich kid's name to me. When I finally noticed what was happening, I was too shocked to move for a second. I did go up and claim it, but I'm still surprised my name was drawn. Most of the names that did get drawn were there longer than me. I went for 5 years, but it was always the same few names each semester, and it was pretty obvious that it was rigged. One of my teachers was fired after being outed as gay. In Australia, it's completely legal for religious schools to fire/not hire a person because of their beliefs in order to ensure Christians teach at Christian schools. This just opens the door for many forms of discrimination. This man was extremely religious. He went to church multiple times a week, was extremely charitable, and would often use the Bible to help spread love and positivity to those who were open to hearing about it. He'd worked at the school for years and was a favorite amongst students. Everyone I knew in school who he taught absolutely loved him. He would go out of his way to ensure his classroom was a comfortable and safe environment, and when he noticed I was struggling in 10th grade, he took me aside after class to ask if I was okay. I spent most of my lunches in his classroom, which he left unlocked and available to anyone who felt they had nowhere to go and needed somewhere quiet and private to spend their free time. He was one of the only adults who provided me with any kind of comfort during some of the worst years of my life, and definitely the only teacher I had who paid any attention to the mental health of his students and provided them with any form of help he could. He's an amazing man who genuinely cared for those he taught, and he lost his job over something out of his control that didn't affect his work at all. You couldn't even try to claim he was spreading gay agenda or symbol like that, because none of us knew until we found out why he was gone. There were many staff members there who absolutely deserved to lose their jobs for abuse of power, but still work there now years later. It makes my blood boil. Once when I was a lot younger, I had a swimming lesson to go to for sports in school. I was feeling quite unwell at the time, really stuffy nose, and I assume the sports department don't want snot in their pool. I had also lost my swimming kit a few days prior to the lesson. So I went up to my sports teacher, a young child, and told them that I had lost my swimming kit and I wasn't feeling well. Apparently the teacher thought that losing my swimming kit is something we can ignore and straight on ask me if I have a note from my mum. I explained that my mum was ill and had been sleeping in this morning, so she hadn't had the chance to write anything. The sports teacher seemed to ignore that too, on purpose, and asked me again if I have a note. I was visibly ill, not sure why this was happening. I told her she could phone my mum if she wanted confirmation. She took serious offense at this comment somehow and started telling me how rude I was. She yelled at me for having zero manners and being utterly unacceptable. I got really scared and started crying. I sat down on the bench and she let me off the swimming lesson, but she decided to tell me firmly be nicer next time. I was so confused and upset, I continued crying. Remember, I was a young and rather sensitive child, so things like this really hurt. I wasn't popular in the school, only had one friend, so practically all the rest of my school year decided to take this as an opportunity to gossip, make rumors, and laugh at me all behind my back. I never trusted that teacher again, or my school year. Haven't gone through all the comments on here, but haven't seen this one yet. It's about bullying, but from another perspective. and happened to my mom. My mom was an English teacher at a poor school in northern North Carolina. The students she had to deal with were total sheets. Some of them were obviously passed just to get them out of the hair of their previous teachers. A couple of the kids literally couldn't spell their name the same way twice in the same day. I graded some of their papers, 6 different spellings for the same name, all written in the scrawl of a kindergartner. Anyway, the point behind this, there were bullies, but it was the students. In the same month, my mom had things stolen from her purse, which was locked in the desk, 5 times. She had a girl try to blackmail her to return her phone. Another did the same for her car keys. Her car was broken into 3 times. Teachers had their own monitored parking lot. She was threatened 4 times. Had a knife pulled on her twice. On separate occasions both a girl and a boy smacked her. One boy tried to shove her into a janitorial closet between classes. The principal's and school board's response? I'm sorry, you can't retaliate against them. You're a teacher, they're students. They are also poor and underprivileged, and have a hard enough time, so you just have to go back in there and deal with it. You absolutely cannot defend yourself, since you could go to jail for assaulting a minor. She resigned at the end of that month. I had a teacher, for a 9-week course, who flunked me, because she didn't like me, and her grandson didn't like me. She was the proctor in the cafeteria in the mornings. I'd eat breakfast there, cereal. Of course, I like taking my time. She didn't like that, despite there being no rule stating that I had to eat and be out in 5 minutes. Rule was, as long as the student left when the bell for homeroom sounded, they could eat breakfast or sit there as long as there was room. So, she hated that I took my time reading while eating my cereal. Her grandson was in the same course with me that she taught. He and his friends would pick on me and bully me, but of course they got off without incident, and I was always blamed. One day, she told me that she didn't like my attitude and disrupting the class, and that she didn't care how well I did, she was going to flunk me. I'm sorry, if your precious grandson would stop stealing my sheet and throwing things at me, I wouldn't disrupt class trying to get my stuff back. I got an F the day after that. My mom ended up subbing for the hateful old beach. Had the grade book for the 9-week course. Mom looked in it and copied it for proof. My grade average was a 93. In the space right next to it, for final grade, the hag wrote F. Went to the grade counselor about it, went to the principal for it, and no one did a thing. Teacher claimed that I failed because the class participation grade. It was a journalism class. We basically read newspapers and magazines and wrote our own articles about them. There was no class participation outside of that point. Another time, my junior year, was in my English class. A friend and I studied for a test we had coming up. We took the test, both only got one answer wrong. The same one. We also had the highest scores. Teacher gave us both 2 days of in-school suspension because she accused us of cheating. She privately admitted to me that she knew that we did not cheat, but that she was using us as an example to anyone else that cheated. That teacher had this thing, where if you could give her a decently comprehensive verbal report on a book you read, you would get a ticket. 3 tickets would count as a bypass for 1 assignment. 5 tickets would bypass a test. I had 75 tickets, and was not allowed to get any more. I literally could have cashed in my tickets, and not done a damn thing in that class for the remaining part of the semester, at that point. But, no, I had to serve as an example to anyone else who was cheating. And there were people cheating. One pair was the teacher's nephew and the nephew's best friend. I could go on about a particular school for ages, but short list. Banning students from using the toilet cubicles to change for gym class. The gym teacher, female, would walk into the change room and make sure nobody was trying to change in the toilet cubicles or in the old, broken showers. If you came out of the cubicle when she knocked holding your clothes / having your bag, she'd give you detention as nobody else had that privilege. Why should you? I already had massive anxiety about changing as an ugly girl, and if I was on my period, blah blah blah, so shrugged, accepted the detention, and refused to go. Treating special needs students, teens, like literal children. I was infantilized constantly, and when I made decisions, like my peers did, like deciding not to bring lunch cause I was teased for being a messy, autistic, eater, the school threatened docs, Oz CPS, constantly. Don't get me wrong, my family had issues, but this wasn't one of them, and I was very open to the lady interviewing me, that this was my decision, that I was capable of making the policy of well you retaliated so what they did to you doesn't matter now. I was bullied/harassed regularly, honestly, some of it deserved as I was, again, an autistic weirdo. But when a classmate got physical, sexual, with me, I slapped him across the face, and was immediately told welp, we can't help you now, because you hit him back. Sorry, now you'll face suspension. Thankfully wasn't suspended, but what? Like that's ridiculous, and goes beyond zero tolerance. Like, I would have taken it, if he was suspended too, but pretending he did nothing at all, because I hit him back? Ridiculous. Not sure if you're talking just about K-12, or if you are also asking about college level practices too. I taught for many years at music schools and conservatories and the single most dishonest thing that happens, in my opinion, is during the recruitment process. Most of my students were music ed majors. It's easy to level with a performance major about the lack of job opportunities out there, but everyone acts like a music ed degree is well worth the investment. Sometimes it is, but not if you have to borrow huge sums of money to pay the private school tuition. Think of it this way, does it make sense to have $70,000 to $80,000 worth of debt after graduating if you start out at about $38,000 a year? Not in my opinion. Also, private music school professors have a conflict of interest in terms of their advice on whether to take as many general education courses as possible at a community college to save money. Yes, it's true that you will have a fair amount of catching up to do with the ensemble and music courses if you go to a community college first, but you will save a boatload of money. I could have been fired for this, but on more than one occasion I told a potential student, unless your parents pay for most of it, it's probably not a good investment for you to get a music ed degree here. If you have to borrow most of your tuition money, you play well enough to get in, but we are unlikely to give you much talent money. Maybe you should go to a state school that has 1/3 our tuition. Just be so bad at putting the budget in places that matter, like my school is split in 2 main blocks, and one is new, and the other is from when True School was first opened. I think it was like late 1800s, and that was the whole school as it only had like 90 to 100 people, but as you guessed, it's very old and rundown. This means that in the oldest building, the rest got new paint jobs. That's it, has had nothing done, and as a result there is a massive mold on the wall. How this school is still faking open God knows, but as the rest is so small, students are supposed to eat in there now. The other option is for teachers to go out of their way, on their unpaid break, to supervise a bunch of teenagers in their classrooms, and the school don't even care. So many of the teachers either joke about it, acknowledge it but do nothing, or pretend it doesn't exist. Meanwhile the school does have the budget to run service for teachers to upload their shared work to. Most of them either don't know how to use it and just email each other, or they're an IT teacher plus they provide free Microsoft 365 for all students and teachers. Okay, I guess this has been useful for me, but most of the time a computer either comes with it pre-installed, or those students don't have computers, or like a Chromebook or something that doesn't support it. There are so many other problems with those buildings too, like it's so cold that if the not very effective heating breaks, the school is required by law to close. So ultimately this is adding to the running costs they scrape to afford. If you don't even know how to keep your buildings up, don't run a school. I know this isn't my place to rant, but I just wanted to tell you all SMTH. So in my former school we used to have a morning assembly. When we stepped foot into school they'd wait till 7:40 for everyone to get in the school, and then make the latecomers stand for like half an hour in the hot sun for coming a few minutes late. This isn't related to my story, but thought I'd share it, you know. So the school was great and all till our principal retired, and the vice principal took over. After she got the position, shit hit the fan. There was plenty of space in my old school that most kids stood in, while others went sneakily to their classrooms to avoid attending the shitty assembly. So we start the assembly with the morning prayer, thanking God and that he may assist us in our studies and thanks for the food we eat etc. So we only sang the school anthem for special purposes when the former principal, FP, was in charge. Since present principal, Pages, got behind that desk nothing was the same. FP was a sweet old woman nearly in her early 70s. Estimate. She'd meet the students during recess when we played in the big school ground. She was really nice. All the parents liked her. She retired for a reason still unknown to me. Q Pages Jeton in command. She was the sweet on outside, but bitter inside kind of person. She sometimes came out of her air-conditioned office just to tell the kids to pick up trash from the ground, and I don't mean she'd tell one kid to pick up just one piece of trash. She ordered like one child to freaking clean the whole ground. Mostly this annoyed the selected kid who usually just went back to doing whatever they were after she got her eye of him/her. My parents were in touch with the principals and head of departments, so Pages, whenever she saw me, told specifically me to clean the ground. It wasn't only Pages, other teachers were also doing the same thing after seeing Pages tell other kids to do it. I lost one of my napkins my mom handmade for me. It was just plain white lol, and I was devastated. I was in 5th grade, so I did whatever any other stupid kid would do. I searched the entire ground to find it. But in the end my friend would find it for me. If you're adding thanks, I'll never forget it. Anyways, about the school anthem part. As I said, we only sang it on special occasions like if it was the school's birthday or a national hero's birthday etc. But ever since Pages got elected, yes, we have a election system for teachers and principals. Really complicated. We had to sing the 20 minutes long school anthem at 7:40 in the morning at the top of our lungs in the heat of the sun. Kids fainting due to severe heat strokes was almost normal every 2 days in the week. If we didn't sing it loud enough or one side of the 1000s of students sounded low or off course, we would have to restart it fully. It went, and I quote, "We all love school name. We all love school name. We love you more and more. Never leave you alone. We love you more and more. Never leave you alone. We all love school name. We all love school name." This went on for about 20 minutes, mind you. We screamed for the whole duration of his crappy anthem. Pages never really did anything good as the principal. She just arranged Christmas plays in which, and I'm not making this up, Muslim/non-Christians would have to participate if their teachers forced them. The children peer pressured into going into the play had to buy the clothes for the Christmas play, which the school did not pay for. I remember one of my friends, Christian, said that he had to buy a 5,000 Pakistani rupees, almost $30, but it's still a lot for a dress in my country, dress for the play. And oh, did I mention that Christians would get roughly 20% off their fees for following a specific religion? That is messed up, man. The education also became flawed after FP left, because kids who would regularly compliment teachers and bring them gifts would get away with cheating and have less mistakes in freaking final exams. I remember we had a kid in 5th grade, let's call him Aj, cause why the hell not? He already knew Ms. No Name, Ms. NN. So Aj was the free kid who never did any work, but just asked the top 5 best students in class to help him, which was literally just copying their homework word to word. Ms. NN never said anything to him, and even helped him in tests to her fullest. Aj was most definitely doing it on purpose, because he actually most of the time wasn't aware what the teacher was teaching anyways, because he was either sleeping or doing copy pasting another subject's work. So Ms. NN helped him in his finals, because he didn't learn anything. She asked one of the top 3 toppers to just tell him the answers. I was one of them, and my best friend was the other. The third kid was Aj's friend, so he really didn't mind it. My friend and I stared at each other at what they were doing. When the teacher tried to persuade us, my friend thankfully dodged the question as I couldn't. I told the teacher something like, "Isn't cheating a bad thing?" She cut me off and said like she was Aj's lawyer, just showing him a little couldn't hurt. Anyways, he is your friend after all. I decided to just keep quiet and do my exam. She tried to convince me on a few other hard finals, but after I rejected the offer a few times she didn't care to bother. I can proudly say that if that teacher wasn't there to help him, or if we had taken action, the child would have undoubtedly faced expulsion and the teacher would be fired. Note, I didn't disclose anyone's identity, because if this spreads, it will spread like wildfire and I don't want anyone to face anything because of me.